Good evening. The meeting will now be in order. Would everybody please silence their mobile devices? I see that there is a sufficient number of voters present to allow us to open the meeting. And this evening we will continue with the annual town meeting warrant, beginning with Article 21. This evening, the gymnasium is the only venue for the meeting, and voting will take place only in the gymnasium. To vote on tonight's articles, you must be occupying a seat in this room. CCTV's live coverage of the meeting will be broadcast in the cafeteria so that those who are enjoying a snack may follow along. I would now like to invite Fire Chief Mark Cotreau to tell us what we need to know in the unlikely event of an emergency. Chief Cotreau.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good evening. We want to have a safe town meeting, so tonight if you could just look around and see if you can locate the exit sign that's closest to you. If you're in this area of the gym, there's actually an exit behind this big screen here, and you might have not have a view of that exit sign, but if you go right around the side, you'll hit that exit. If the alarms go off or you're otherwise instructed to exit the building, just go to the nearest exit, and when you go through that door, look around and you're going to find another door going straight outside. It's a well-designed building, terrific building that way. And we want to maintain the aisle space, so the chairs are all connected for a reason, and so we don't want the chairs to get disconnected and obstruct an aisleway. And if you do have children in daycare over at the Maroon Gym, then they're under the same instructions. So if the alarm goes off, just exit and go around outside to the front of the building by the parking lot in the Maroon Gym, and you'll find your children out there waiting for you. Great. Have a safe night.
Thank you, Chief Cotreau. On behalf of the meeting, I want to thank Fire Chief Cotreau, Police Chief O'Connor, and both of their excellent departments for their service to us during town meeting. We also owe a big thank you to the town meeting team, Town Manager Chris Whalen and his staff, Acting Town Clerk Pat Clifford and her staff, Public Works Director Rich Rain and his staff, Technology Director Mark Howell and his staff, Thistle, who provide the equipment in the hall, CCTV, who records and broadcasts the proceedings. And the blue ribbon thank you goes to Town Meeting Coordinator Laurel Landry, who orchestrates it all. On Monday night, the meeting elected Ms. Peggy Briggs of 253 Elm Street as Deputy Town Moderator, who will take over the duties of the moderator if she is unable to fulfill them. The Deputy Moderator has been sworn to the faithful and impartial discharge of her duties. I want to introduce our elected and appointed officials who are at tables at the front of the hall. To my left is the Board of Selectmen, and just past them, the Planning Board. And to my right is the Finance Committee. The Selectmen, the Finance Committee, the Planning Board, and many other boards and committees have burned a lot of midnight oil understanding and analyzing the issues before us tonight. And you will hear their recommendations on the articles as they are heard. You'll also find the FinCom and Select Board recommendations on the articles inside the front cover of the FinCom report, which is available on the tables in the cafeteria. The FinCom report is well worth spending some time with, and I encourage you to do so. You'll find it an excellent window into our town's current and future financial picture. If you haven't stopped at the tables in the cafeteria to collect materials for tonight's articles, you will want to do so. Some of the articles will be moved as printed in handouts, and many of the articles are further explained by information on the table. You'll also find the green booklet entitled Town Meeting Traditions and Procedures, which looks like this. This is the rules of the road guide for this evening's meeting. There's also a questionnaire about town meeting out on the tables that I very much hope will fill out. We're particularly interested in how you have liked having town meeting in the gymnasium, and how useful you have found the town meeting information on the town website. The back of the form invites you to make any comments or suggestions that you may have, and there's a box in the cafeteria for the completed questionnaires, or you may send them in later to the town clerk's office, or scan and email to moderator@concordma.gov. There's also an online version of this questionnaire, which is accessible by a link to the town website, and you can fill that out interactively online, and that's another way you can get us your feedback, which is going to be very helpful to us for future planning. If you do have questions tonight on town meeting procedure, I would invite you to consult with our able town meeting resource person, Joanna Glazer. Ms. Glazer is seated in the front row. I'm going to ask her to stand and wave right now. There she is. So you know where she is. Thank you very much, Ms. Glazer. The town is always in search of citizens willing to donate their time and talent to the conduct of town affairs. Many boards and committees will need new members right after town meeting. If you are interested in working directly on issues that affect the town and getting to know your community better, I would invite you to fill out a green card. They look like this. They're also out on the table. There's also one inside the back cover of the annual town meeting warrant, and you can find one on the website that you can fill out interactively online. I have appointed Mr. Abe Fisher of 400 Hayward Mill Road to be head teller, and Mr. David Carr of 82 Lawsbrook Road to be ballot supervisor, with Richard Wells of 368 Lawsbrook Road to be assistant ballot supervisor. Mr. Fisher will supervise a standing counted vote if we require one, and Mr. Carr will supervise the counting of ballots if the meeting should vote to take a ballot vote. Mr. Fisher, are the tellers ready to be sworn? Mr. Carr, are the ballot counters ready to be sworn? Tellers and ballot counters, would you all please stand and raise your right hands? Does each of you swear that you will faithfully and impartially perform your respective duties at this town meeting? Thank you all. Please be seated. On behalf of the meeting, I offer our gratitude to Mr. Fisher, Mr. Carr, Mr. Wells, and each of the tellers and ballot counters for taking on this vital town meeting role. And remember, your votes need to be counted too. All voters should have received a voting slip when they checked in. Thank you. The voting slip is a different color every night. Tonight, it looks like this. Your voting slip is what identifies you as a registered Concord voter and enables you to vote. Please write your name on it and keep it handy. And it was pointed out to me that you should probably write your name on the top, because if you write it down here and we have a ballot vote, your ballot won't be secret. So make sure you write it on the top. We have some visitors to our town meeting tonight, and we welcome you. Each visitor should have registered in the cafeteria and received a visitor badge, and the visitors need to sit in the visitors section marked at the end of the bleachers closest to the cafeteria unless they have received permission from the moderator to sit elsewhere. We also have with us this evening Town Council Mina Macarius of Anderson and Krieger, and he will be invited to address the meeting if we have a legal question this evening. We have a preliminary motion to begin this evening's session. Mr. Lawson moves that the meeting take up no new business after 10 p.m. and that we adjourn and reconvene, if necessary, to complete the warrant at 7 p.m. on April 27th, tomorrow evening, in this hall. Is there a second? I see that there is. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. The motion carries, and I so declare. We will now turn our attention to the annual town meeting warrant. Please be sure you've silenced your mobile devices. I will ask all the presenters on tonight's articles to note that their prearranged presentation time will count down on the clock on the screen, and that the lights on the podium will flash when time is running out, yellow when 30 seconds remain, and red when 10 seconds remain. When we open the floor for comments and questions, please approach a microphone and state your name and address when your microphone number is called. I've been asked by some town meetings last night, night before, to consider pro and con microphones, and we have them tonight. The three con microphones are at the front of the auditorium. They are 1, 2, and 3. And the three microphones at the rear, 4, 5, and 6, are pro microphones. So please pay attention to which microphone you're standing at. Make sure that the microphone matches your view on the article. The 7th microphone over there is at an accessible height, and that may be used by any speaker. Please do remember that tonight we are a legislative body with a moderator presiding. Your questions and comments are made on behalf of the Assembly, and they should be addressed to the moderator and not to the speaker on the podium. Every speaker from the floor will have 2 minutes. The clock on the screen will track your time, and we will stop the clock when an answer to a question is being given and resume it if there's a follow-up question, just to make sure that nobody gets more than their fair share of time on the floor. One last word before we begin our deliberations tonight. As a community and as a town meeting, we want to balance full and fair debate with reasonable and efficient use of our time. We want to avoid repetitive debate that sheds little new light on the issues that are under consideration. But we want people to have a chance to air their views. Please consider these community values and goals before you move the previous question to end debate. If many people still are standing at the microphones, perhaps there's more to discuss. And if no one is standing at the microphone but you, perhaps debate has already ended and there's no need to move to do so. We will now take up Article 21.
Madam Moderator, Chris Whalen, Town Manager. I live at 1935 Main Street.
Mr. Whalen.
Article 21 requests that the town vote to establish a revolving fund for 2 working farms that the town owns and leases to local farmers. The town purchased the Marshall Farm in 2010, and the third generation of the Marshall family is farming the property. The property includes 2 residences, a farm stand, and several greenhouse buildings. The dwellings are adjacent to 20 acres of town-owned land that was purchased by the town in the 1970s, and the farmers draw water from the Assabet River for irrigation. The Marshall Farm is located in a residential neighborhood and is close to town land such as the Rogers land acquired recently and the Harrington House grounds that were acquired in 1975. The Barrett's Mill farm property at 449 Barrett's Mill Road was acquired by the town from the McGrath family in 2013. The property includes 2 acres, a large single-family home to which a 1-bedroom apartment has been added, as well as a bunkhouse, a greenhouse, and an architect-designed farm stand. The farmhouse is adjacent to more than 46 acres of farmable town conservation land, including 7.5 acres across Barrett's Mill Road at the corner of Strawberry Hill Road. The farm lease includes a portion of the recently restored Red Barn on conservation land, and a solar power array was added to the roof of that barn to generate a portion of the electricity used on the farm. These 2 properties are leased to farmers at below market rent in order to support the farm operation. The current rental income to the town from the 2 properties is shown here. The income from these 2 properties flows currently to the general fund and is not available to support the farm and maintain the properties. Routine upkeep and repair on the properties is the responsibility of the farmers, but major repairs such as roofs, heating systems, and significant electrical work is the responsibility of the town under the lease agreements. Some funds allocated to the town's central building maintenance account have been used to repair the farm properties. It seems more prudent to separate the rental income from these properties in a revolving fund, which can be reserved for important repairs without tapping into the account that's intended to maintain the town's operational facilities, such as the police station and townhouse. A revolving fund approach has worked successfully to maintain the historic Harrington House on Harrington Avenue, using the rental income from the tenant to upkeep the property. The town's decision to purchase these two farms has helped preserve open space and allowed a new generation of farmers to learn the business, to support their families, and grow food for local tables. The resident farmers are working in cooperation with the Natural Resources Commission and the Agricultural Committee to promote good farming and soil management practices. Creating a revolving fund into which the farm rental income is deposited will help ensure that these town-owned farmsteads will remain viable for years to come. I recommend your affirmative vote on Article 21. Thank you very much.
Before we open the floor to questions and comments, is there a second on Article 21? I see that there is. And I want to report to you that the Select Board and the Finance Committee both recommend affirmative action on Article 21. I'll remind you that the microphones at the back are pro microphones, and the microphones at the front are con microphones, and number 7 is an accessible microphone. And seeing no one at any microphone, I think we're ready for a vote on Article 21. Would all those in favor please raise your ballots? Thank you very much. All those opposed? That looks like a unanimous vote. The motion carries, and I do so declare. Articles 22 and 23 were acted on by the meeting on the consent calendar, and we'll accordingly proceed to Article 24. 23, sorry. Is there a second for the motion under Article 23? I see that there is. And everyone should note that the motion on Article 23 is as printed in a handout, which is available on tables in the cafeteria.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. My name is Kate Hodges. I'm the Assistant Town Manager. Article 23 seeks town meeting's authorization to purchase the property located at 55 Church Street. The primary purpose of this acquisition is to create a centralized campus for the town's human services divisions. The proximity of this property to the adjacent Harvey Wheeler Community Center works well to establish a one-stop shopping for community services in Concord. Concord Social Services team are dedicated professionals who advocate for our community's most vulnerable citizens. At-risk youth, domestic violence victims, elderly patients, and families who have simply fallen on difficult times benefit a great deal from the services the town of Concord provides. 2 years ago, this town meeting developed a centralized Department of Human Services. The idea was to showcase our commitment to our neighbors whose voices may not be being heard. The social services team helps residents in Concord during arguably the worst times in their lives. Having all of these services in a centralized campus, which has more private off-street parking, access to public transit, and private consultation offices, is important to maintaining the professionalism and dignity within this operation. The Church Street building is slightly over 5,000 square feet and was built in 2013. There are a total of 4 levels, including a walk-up unfinished attic space. A fully accessible elevator extends to all floors, including the 3rd. Additional office and conference rooms are within the building envelope, are also fully ADA acceptable and building code compliant. Each floor possesses ADA restrooms and large corridors for traffic. For those who may not be aware, the current social services staff offices are split between 2 locations, one at 105 Everett Street, pictured here, and the other at the Harvey Wheeler Community Center in West Concord. The above photo is the Everett Street location, a Cape Cod-style home built around 1935, which actually belongs to the state and not the town. The building is not ADA or code compliant. Clients attempting to access service here have very little privacy. In fact, in order to reach the single social services office on the first floor, an individual must walk through several recreational yoga spaces, often while they're in session. Parking is limited and is mainly available on street, another challenge for privacy. The youth service and veterans offices are located on the second floor of the set of stairs. There's no elevator access or second means of egress. Clients who suffer from mobility issues simply cannot access this area and must seek alternate places for counseling. The Harvey Wheeler Center serves as the other main location for the town's social service businesses. While the building is significantly better suited than the 105 location, there are a number of space challenges, including the lack of private office space for our gerontology and public health nurse, as well as our outreach social workers. Over the past 5 years, the need for social services-related assistance for people under the age of 60 has increased by 63%. Concord Elder Services has increased their outreach operation by over 50% by adding one additional outreach worker and also making the existing 2 full-time. This image shows the facility's first floor plan. As you can see, upon entrance to the facility, there will be an accessible reception and information space that's suitable for both walk-in and appointments. Here, the human services staff can place information racks and free pamphlets for self-service. In the area seen on the left, we plan to create a smaller office space for our veteran services. There'll be a doorway between the existing library you see here and the adjacent office, which can be used by the community services coordinator. We also plan to use the library as swing space, perhaps for group therapy. Easy access to the social work office and the veterans agent is also great for administrative purposes, as they often see similar clients. The conference room can remain open to the town's organizations. It can fit 15 people comfortably. The above plot is also for the second floor. Initially, there's a plan to create a doorway between the 2 left offices. The idea is to have one dedicated medical clinic space. The others could be used as private exam areas, consultation rooms for the public health nurse. This area can also be closed off. We also plan to remove the wall of the existing conference room in the small office to offer a large swing space for COA and recreational activities. Perhaps a sink can be added for painting, pottery, and other programming. Offices on this floor can also include Concord's Retirement Board, Youth Services, Recreational Child Care, and other rec offices. This last image is of the basement floor. We don't plan to make any large structural changes to this multi-purpose room because it can be used by town departments and committees when needed. We do plan to create a projection screen area with large mounted smart boards so the space could be used for trainings, lectures, and educational sessions. The large room could be used by many committees, civic groups, and organizations who need space for their meetings. This room can fit more than 40 people. The acquisition of this building for municipal purposes is necessary to ensure that our human services divisions are able to assist our most vulnerable citizens in an atmosphere that's inviting, accessible, and professionally. Additionally, the programming and meeting space is at a premium throughout Concord. The purchase of this property will undoubtedly lessen scheduling and use conflicts. I ask for your favorable vote on Article 23.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. I believe we will hear from the Select Board. Ms. Kaufman?
Good evening. I'm Alice Kaufman, 1615 Lowell Road, member of the Select Board and speaking on their behalf.
Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So you just heard Article 23 asks town meeting for approval for the purchase of the property at 55 Church Street. Town offices are housed in buildings throughout Concord. At the townhouse, at the public works facilities on Keyes Road, at the light plant, in the small building next to Sleepy Hollow, at the Harvey Wheeler Center, we're spread out across town. While staff and the public make do with these arrangements, some of the facilities present challenges to meet the modern lighting needs or IT infrastructure, and in some cases, public access needs. You saw the photos of the Everett Street building, which houses some of the town's human services offices. It's not fully accessible and therefore failing to meet many of the clients' needs. In the meantime, across town, the Harvey Wheeler building has seen a dramatic increase in participation in its many programs for Concord's elders. Many of the programs currently operating from Everett Street serve the same clientele as those who enjoy the programming at the Concord Council of Aging. Staff and clients would benefit from integrated access to needed or desired services offered by these 2 offices, and the new space just across the parking lot from Harvey Wheeler would allow the town to expand its services for seniors and others perhaps add space for an after-school program or two, and meet the growth of many of the town's other human services programs. Now, the Select Board always considers the financial burden a request for appropriated funds may present for citizens, and so it was deliberated with this opportunity. Concord's free heard about that last night, and in fact, the current amount in reserves exceeds the benchmark Concord maintains for its AAA bond rating. This article proposes to purchase the property from free cash. It was after this analysis and careful consideration of the Select Board that the Select Board unanimously recommends affirmative action on Article 23.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. And we'll hear from the Finance Committee.
Good evening. I'm Linda Miller, 300 Main Street, Chair of the Finance Committee, and speaking on behalf of the Finance Committee.
Ms. Miller.
I just briefly want to recap the discussion we had last night with regard to free cash, and that also is something that was mentioned by the Select Board. There are a number of articles that will draw your attention in terms of use of free cash, and we wanted to make sure that everyone understood that there was no priority in terms of order of the articles, nor any constraint in terms of would one article, if approved, have any implication on the use of free cash for potentially other articles. So at this point, we have approved at town meeting Article 51, which would use $200,000 from free cash. This article and also Article 19 would approve $1 million to reduce property taxes. This article uses $1.2 million, and potentially Article 30 would also draw another $1 million. If all of these were used, we would still be within very comfortably our position of free cash and our target between 5 and 10% of our budget. So in that regard, we just wanted from the Finance Committee to make sure that there was no confusion in terms of any implications that the use of free cash for this or other articles would have on any other articles that you might vote on tonight or another night. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Miller. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments. Your microphone number 5. You're at a pro microphone. Just checking to make sure you're at the right place. Okay.
I'm pro. Madam Moderator, George Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett?
This is a really sweet building. I'm definitely in favor anytime that, as a taxpayer, anytime the town could acquire a suitable building like this for such a low price. The only question I would have is rhetorical, which is, how did you get such a good price on this? I imagine what it might sell for in in an open auction, for example. But anyway, it's a really great building, and I look forward to holding a meeting in it someday.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to that question, Mr. Whalen? I'm not sure it's truly rhetorical.
We had an independent appraisal done of the property, and the appraiser put the value at $1,060,000, and that is the asking price that the Archdiocese of Boston is requesting. They had an independent appraisal that came up with the exact same figure. The Board of Assessors had it valued at $20,000 below that, so very, very close. The request is for $1.2 million, so the difference between the purchase price and the requested funds tonight will allow us to do some renovation and restoration of the interior of the building.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Microphone number 4.
John Flynn, 50 Range Road.
Mr. Flynn.
Just a couple of comments and questions, I guess. It looks to me like we're kind of getting the position where we're buying little buildings all over town instead of trying to look long range into a permanent type building. My suggestion would be to look into buying the Armory or getting the Armory somehow off the state. We have the building next door. and having a bunch of small buildings. One thing buying the buildings, but we got to maintain them for the future. So I think we'd be better looking at one larger facility than having a bunch of places spread out all over town. And my other comment was going to be increased, Chris answered it, that the town assessors appraised the building at $1,024,000. And I don't know why we're paying $1.2 million for the building, and we're going to put more money into the building to revamp it for what the town wants to do with it. And I guess, and my next question is, the purpose of buying this to benefit the town, or is it to benefit the Catholic Church? We fixed some steps in West Concord at the old Catholic Church. So we supporting the churches around town now, or are we interested in the town of Concord? Thank you.
Mr. Flynn, I want to make sure you realize you were at a pro microphone.
I'll be answering it as if those were all very, very positive. So we're not paying $1.2 million. We're paying $1,060,000, which is what both independent appraisals came back at. As Mr. Whalen said, we are asking for $1.2 million so that we could do some small building renovations to convert it from a place that was just really used for offices and some reflection space to one that can be more widely used for municipal purposes. The benefit to the Catholic Church isn't necessarily something that I can speak to, except for to tell you that the idea of having one campus for human services has been a goal for the town for quite some time. Having the human services functions in some kind of town-wide office building, while doable, isn't necessarily the atmosphere that we were looking for human services. It's helpful to have people be able to come in, and oftentimes they're family members of folks that have people under the ages of 60 and over the ages of 60, and to be able to have all of the areas that they need to access as far as services all in one relative close walking distance has been helpful. Also, the social workers confer with one another, so that's been helpful, or will be.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. Microphone number 6.
Madam Moderator, Paul Lavecchio, 20 Winslow Street.
Mr. Lavecchio.
As a member of the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee, I've had occasion periodically to go to the Everett Street facility and walk through the yoga classes on the way to the second floor, where I've met the predecessor to Bonnie Wilbur or Dick Krug. And I have to say that that facility on the second floor does not allow itself for any private discussions. And the idea of going through the yoga classes sometimes is quite intimidating as the people are flailing their bodies around. In addition, again, as a Hugh Cargill Trust member, I'm also frequently going to the Council on Aging and seeing Ginger Quarles or her staff. And so having the two facilities near each other, where I know both staff members have to talk to each other frequently, I think is a very good idea. So I'm in favor of, please vote in favor of Article 23.
Thank you very much. Now, is that Mr. Flynn again?
Yes.
Would you mind letting the person in back of you have a chance to speak first, just so that we're letting everybody have one chance at the microphone before they get another 2 minutes?
I'm older than him.
I wouldn't have guessed that, but why don't you let him talk anyway? Oh, the gentleman is ceding the microphone. That's very kind, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Flynn.
One last question. Is there anything that are we going to be building a parking lot for the Catholic Church in Concord Center? Anything to do with this?
Are we? No, no, we're not.
Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management. The Catholic Church will be building their own parking lot. However, they have approached the town about combining it, a point of access, through the Vanderhoof parking lot in order to expand the facility behind what is now the existing rectory. The rectory is no longer being used as a rectory. They'll convert that to offices, and they'll connect it to the parish building, Monument Hall. So that's in the works, but that is separate from this particular article.
Thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Peter Fulton, 31 Winthrop Street.
Proceed.
Thank you. I'm speaking for the Concord Retirement Board as its chairman and would like to endorse this. I heard Ms. Hodges, the assistant town manager, describe the roster of offices to get in here. I can't emphasize enough the need for hopefully the retirement board to be included in this space. The privacy needs are close to zero at the current location in the town hall with, ironically because of fire limitations, there's no door allowed on this office space that we have now. So there's, again, no privacy for the operation of the retirement board. It's a good liaison with the veterans programs that will be in the building and also the human services. So, and encourage, make your own decision on the money aspect of it, but I really appreciate the usage of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no one else at a microphone, it appears that we are ready for a vote on Article 23. Oh, one more person. Microphone number 4.
It takes a long time to get back to a pro microphone. I'm Matt Johnson, 21 Winthrop Street.
Mr. Johnson.
I'm a member of the planning board. I'm speaking for myself. I don't think we actually have a bearing on this. But I am in favor of this building, but I think it makes a lot of sense and the price is right. But I just wanted to signal a note of caution. Today, our federal government, our president, came out with a proposed federal tax scheme that would effectively increase our tax rates for our local taxes by up to 40%, because those of us who write off the marginal tax of our local property taxes will no longer be able to do so. And the other tax cuts that are proposed, when you consider Massachusetts state as well as our local property taxes, would not offset these taxes. So we need to be aware that our tax rates are likely to go up substantially next year related to our local spending. So as we continue to add new capital expenses and increase budgets, we need to keep this in mind, that our spending is going to hit hard starting next year.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Seeing no one else at a microphone, I think we are now ready to proceed to a vote on Article 23. All those in favor, please raise your ballots. Thank you. All those opposed? Motion carries by a very wide majority, and I so declare. We'll next proceed to Article 24.
I'm Mark Howell, Chief Information Officer for the Town of Concord, and I live at 668 Nersneck Hill Road.
Is there a second for Mr. Howell's motion? Actually, I guess it's Mr. Whalen's motion, although Mr. Howell is speaking on it. I see that there is a second. Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Article 24 is a request to borrow for a borrowing authorization for the Telecommunications Fund, originally authorized by Article 48 at the 2013 annual town meeting. It requests that the town meeting authorize CMLP to borrow up to $1 million for the purpose of expanding CMLP's telecommunications services, which we market as Concord Light Broadband. The purpose of the borrowing is to enable CMLP to continue to add subscribers to the system by financing installation expenses and equipment upgrades. Funds borrowed under this authorization will be repaid from fees charged to users of the services, not taxes, not electrics rates. By 2012, CMLP had constructed and started to use a fiber optic network for smart grid operations. In 2013, town meeting authorized $1 million borrowing to fund the startup costs for the internet service on the fiber optic network. The majority of the initial borrowing was used to finance construction of the fiber drops, which are the section of the fiber network that connects the customer's home or office to the system. The Concord Light broadband internet service started operating 3 years ago in March 2014. It offers high-speed internet service to residents and businesses in Concord. We offer simple, flat-rate plans. Residential plans start at $49.95 per month for the 25 megabits per second plan, and details can be found at the town's website at concordma.gov/broadband. As of today, the service has over 800 customers, which means that about 10% of CMLP's electric customers are also broadband customers. At Concord Light Broadband, we have policies which we believe are in the best interest of our customers and our community. We know that these two issues have been in the news recently, even today. We want to be very clear. We take customer privacy seriously. We do not collect private information, and we do not share customer information with any third party. Net neutrality is the idea that when you access the internet, you choose to use any service you want. We do not favor any content over any other content. All internet traffic is treated equally by our system, and we think that free, open, private internet access is what our customers want and should get. The service has proved popular. This map shows the installations over the last 3 years. You can see the installations have taken place all over town, and each year we have installed more customers than the previous year. Demand remains strong, even though we have done minimal marketing. Revenue from the broadband service has also been growing steadily. This chart shows the monthly billing since the service started. There are seasonal dips in growth due to the fact that we don't do as many installations in the winter. The borrowing authorization under Article 24 is necessary to continue to expand the subscriber base. Concord Light Broadband charges each new residential subscriber a $150 installation fee and requires a 2-year commitment. However, these installations typically cost over $1,500 to perform. That cost is financed and recovered over time. Equipment upgrades will also be purchased using the funds borrowed under Article 24. By 2020, we expect monthly revenue to be sufficient to fund new installations without additional borrowing. Additional details about the financial plans are available in the Enterprise Budget Book, which is published on the town website. There are many benefits to operating the internet service. Consumers benefit from more competition. The light plant and the municipal government benefit from lower telecommunications costs, and the staff, which is also available to support IT operations. This project is documented in a recently released study by the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University. A link to that study is on this page. It goes into a great deal of detail about the history, benefits, and the progress of our efforts. I urge the meeting to take affirmative action on Article 24 so that CMLP can continue to expand the internet service provided to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. And I want to note that both the Select Board and the Finance Committee have recommended affirmative action on Article 24 in the amount of $1 million. We'll now open the floor to comments and questions. At microphone number 5 there, would you like to speak? No, you're working on a chair. Okay. Microphone number 6, thank you very much.
Yeah. Mark Galis, 62 Prescott Road.
Mr. Galis.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm in favor of the expansion of this service. I actually am a user of the service. It's very satisfied with it. I just have one question. Could you shed a little bit more light on how this borrowed leading money to subsidize expansion of, installations, private and business, will be, and basically my concern is, are there plans to raise the fees anytime sooner or over that kind of projected buildup of the market, for this? Thank you.
Mr. Howell?
There are no plans to raise the fees. In fact, we are quite comfortable that they are competitively set. The primary reason for the continued borrowing is that we simply want to be able to keep the fees low and affordable, and we think that trying to charge a larger amount for installation would be a barrier to people subscribing to the service. So we've been able to do our projections, and all of the operating costs of the business are actually being paid for now out of current monthly revenues. So the only shortfall in revenue we have is represented by the cost of doing those installations. So if you, for example, if we did about 30 installations in a month, which would be typical, we might have up to $45,000 of expense just related to running that new fiber optic cable and installing the equipment related to that. And that is what we're putting on the borrowing.
And is there an anticipation of sort of reduction of the capital cost of extending lines and things like that?
There is. When we build the network, essentially the network ends at the curb outside of a residence or a business now. And that fiber optic cable that we then extend into the building has a life expectancy of 32 years or so. So if, for example, a customer leaves our system and comes back, we don't have to reinstall that cable. We would remove the equipment that's on the end of the cable, but the cable stays there. And so subsequent installations, for example, into an existing location don't cost nearly as much to do. And so we won't have that expense over time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Microphone number 6 again.
Bill Montague, 10 Walden Street.
Mr. Montague.
Last year, I tried to get the high-speed internet into my building, and the town said they couldn't put it in the current piping that brings the underground wiring into the building. You'd have to dig another trench. And I'm wondering why you couldn't bring this high-speed internet wire through the same with the power that the power is in, because it doesn't connect electricity, it's a fiber optic. And I couldn't get an answer from him out of that. Anybody care to answer that question?
Sure, I'll try. Especially in the older areas of town, like the Walden Street area, the amount of conduit that's available for cabling is relatively limited. Some of it is crowded, and some of it has, frankly, can maybe compacted with dirt and so forth. And so bringing the fiber optic cable into a conduit that already has an existing cable in it is really quite difficult, and often in the past there wasn't additional conduit put in order to support communications into a particular building. So unfortunately, it is true that there are some parts of town and some particular buildings where we don't have available conduit. We look for opportunities to add conduit when we can. The expense of installing conduit is quite high, so we don't include that as a part of an offering of the service right now.
Well, the conduit that goes into my building is 6 inches in diameter, and it's only one small cable going through it. So there's no problem getting the wire through there. There seems to be a problem with getting permission to do it.
Okay. I'm being told by the engineering department that in this particular case, it's a safety code issue.
Would you mind explaining that, how it's safety?
I'm sure that we would be happy to explain it to you at the office, for example, if you'd like to contact us. Madam. Okay. So we certainly are happy to look and relook at any existing specific address, and we can go over all of the code issues. We honestly do try as hard as we can to get into every single premise that any particular customer request it for, but unfortunately there are certain situations where we have found that we are not able to connect.
Well, presently they run...
Mr. Montague,
Oh,
I'm going
sure.
to invite you to give Mr. Howell a call at another time, and I'm sure he'll be happy to work with you on this issue. Thank you very much. Microphone number 1.
Scott Hopkinson, 67 Indian Spring Road.
And you're at a con microphone.
That's correct.
Excellent. Good. Just as long as you know.
Yep. So I have a few questions. As you know, Mark, the original plan as we studied this whole rollout of the broadband, targeted roughly 2,000 homes out of the 6,800 or so endpoints. And congratulations to you guys that you've made it this far. And by the way, I am a happy user of Concord broadband. My concern is this. As we discussed, you're anticipating adding additional staff to increase the rate of installations, which, while initially is a great idea, I'm concerned about the back end. If we get to, let's say, 2,000 installed homes, which would be roughly 2 years from now, you'll have a number of people that are involved in the installation activity that are no longer, if we assume that's the upper limit of what the saturation for the town is, then what's the plan for those folks? Are you going to lay them off again, or have you thought through that end of this deal? As we know, the whole business of rolling out the broadband is very front-end loaded with this last 200 feet and the $1,500 or so that you have to spend. So that's my question.
Okay. The question is about staffing. We currently do have 3 installers that we're working, and we actually don't have any plans to add more installers at this stage of the game. In terms of the overall staff for the broadband effort, we do share some of that stuff with the IT department, and we are looking at whether or not we have the exact right mix of networking. But in the 5-year plan, which is part of the document, the Enterprise Budget Fund document, we do anticipate some modest growth in staff from here, but actually we're pretty much where we think we need to be, maybe one more position.
All right.
And I don't anticipate that once the rate of installation levels off, which we haven't seen it do yet, but when it does, I don't anticipate that we would need to reduce staff in response to that.
Okay, and do you have any, based on their 3 years experience so far, do you anticipate that the full saturation level of the broadband will exceed the 2,000 number we started with?
It seems likely that it could. So what the speaker is referring to is that when we initially did the business plan for the broadband service, we assumed that we would achieve about 2,000 subscribers. That seems quite likely right now, and we'll know when we get a little bit closer whether or not we might exceed that, but I actually do think it's likely.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 6.
Thank you. I'm Bernie Jenkins, and I live at 32 Staffordshire Lane.
Ms. Jenkins.
I very much support this whole concept. Unfortunately, Staffordshire Lane is a condominium complex of 24 units, and there are a lot of these condo complexes and apartments going around, being built around town. And we've been told that because it's off the road, off of Main Street, you'd have to run the conduit. And I'm hoping in your planning that you consider that there are people like us that would like to do this, but we can't.
So the question from the speaker really regards the conduit on private property, and particularly private property which is involved in multi-dwelling units. And that is correct. Some of those dwelling units, again, usually ones that were built during a certain period of time in the late 1900s, the late last century, 20 years ago, didn't include additional communications conduit. However, we are working with some condo associations and other multi-dwelling unit property owners to help them plan conduit, and should they be interested in installing that throughout their complexes, we are happy to connect them to the system. So we will work with people to do that, and we're working on how we can support some of that from the engineering side.
Are you speaking of the new construction, or is that something that might be available to existing complexes?
Fiber optic cable can be buried in existing in existing property. It's a more modest trenching operation than putting in new electric. When electric services are replaced, that's also an opportunity to add additional services. So it's probably not appropriate to talk about specific properties, but there are definitely properties around town that are moving ahead with that sort of project.
Okay. But it is in the planning stage.
Yes, we're happy to work with you, and the best thing for condo associations to do is to move ahead and contact us as an association and let us do a group project.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Microphone 6 again.
Hi, I'm Moira Walsh, 169 Thoreau Street. And
Ms. Walsh?
Before I ask my question, I do want to commend all of you volunteers. This is an amazing process, and I've been many years, but I think every American should watch this process. But my question is regarding, and again, it's probably naive, you've done a lot of work in this area. How does this fit in with bringing competition to Concord? Right now, Comcast is really the only real game in town, unless you have that fiber optics into your facility. And cell service, I only find one that works really well in Concord. So I guess my question is, does this money in any way think about that? I love the net neutrality, I love the privacy part, but I guess I'm thinking 20 years down the line. Could this help those things move forward?
I would say it most certainly does. After all, the customers that have already opted for the Concord Light broadband service versus the other alternatives in town, which prior to 2003 were DSL or internet from Comcast, the cable provider, have recognized that this is a legitimate third choice already for about 10% of properties. 95% of our parcels are already able to be connected to this system directly, so there's a relatively small number of parcels for which the service is not available, so it is a viable option. It's competitively priced, and our policies around net neutrality and privacy are basically saying we will provide access to the internet, and you can get to any service that you want to use that is on the internet using our service.
So in the long run, this would allow you to view television?
Absolutely. Most people that are using the service are streaming television today. That is by far the heaviest use of the service.
Sir, are you standing at microphone 6?
Yes, I am. Christian Fisher, 96 Wilson Road.
Mr. Fisher.
And as I'm listening to this, it's a $1 million expenditure. I'm asking myself, is there any financial risk to the town? It's presented as self-funding, and it's approved by the Finance Committee, so I assume that the risk is minimal.
It is minimal. It's also true that, as I indicated, the need to borrow these funds is primarily driven by actual installation orders and new customers signing up. So we don't borrow any of this money until after we've already connected a customer for which we had an expense. And we have the 2-year commitment and high confidence. We really have had just a handful of people who've even left the system, most of whom have moved out of town. And so we're very confident that we will be able to spend this prudently. And the model suggests that once we've reached the 2020 point, we will have enough funding coming in every month that we're already paying back some of the initial borrowing. We'll be able to pay this back and continue to operate and do new installations all off the regular monthly revenue.
Microphone number 5.
Peggy Wargelin, 97 Hillside Avenue.
Ms.
On the
Wargelin.
competition comment, I guess I wanted to say that even though we haven't signed up for the town broadband, once it became available, suddenly, mysteriously, our Comcast speeds went way up. So we're very grateful that you exist, even though we haven't converted yet.
Yeah. You probably also started seeing $200 gift cards showing up in your mailbox.
Mr. Howell,
Yes.
you don't know it yet, but you're about to make an amendment to your motion.
Okay.
At the recommendation actually, I guess it's Mr. Whalen's motion. So, Mr. Whalen, you're about to make an amendment to your motion, and there it is. It is a change in the borrowing authority, just to straighten out precisely where that borrowing authority is. Is there a second for this motion to amend? I see that there is. Any discussion of the amendment? No, you don't want to discuss the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All in favor of the amendment, please raise your ballots. Thank you. All opposed? I see that the amendment carries by a wide majority, almost unanimous, and I so declare. And we'll now return to the discussion of Article 24. I see there's one more person standing at microphone number 6.
Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Lane, Green, which I really would like to be able to use. I just wanted to say that this seems to me to be the kind of investment that really pays off for us as a community, both financially and in protecting of our freedom. In the future, no one will be able to limit our ability to find things out. In the same way that our light plant protects our freedom to have decent electrical access. I really think we should do this and other things like this because it's an investment in our ability to educate ourselves even.
Thank you very much. I see no one else at a microphone, and I think that we're now ready for a vote on Article 24. All those in favor of Article 24, please raise your ballots. Thank you very much. All those opposed? That looks like, is there one? Okay. All those opposed? No. All right, I see no one opposed, so that looks like a unanimous vote in favor of Article 24, and I do so declare.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, before we proceed, I just want to go back for one moment to Article 23, and I clarify the declaration of the vote there. I did declare that there was a very substantial majority that voted there. The requirement there is actually 2/3, and there was certainly well over 2/3. So I just want to be clear in my declaration of the vote that there was more than 2/3 in favor of Article 23, and I so declare. Okay. We'll now move on to... Let's see, I have no motion under Article 25, which has been altered slightly to be Article 3 on the special town meeting warrant and has already been addressed. Accordingly, I declare that the meeting is taking no action on Article 25, and we will now move on to Article 26. And we'll hear from Mr. Gainsborough of the Concord Municipal Light Board.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dan Gainsborough, 899 Lowell Road, member of the Concord Municipal Light Board, speaking on its behalf.
Mr. Gainsborough.
Thank you. Article 26 requests $3 million be borrowed and repaid by the ratepayers to upgrade the smart grid system. This investment will allow Concord Municipal Light Plant to provide more information about electricity use for both customers and the plant itself. The goal is to create greater awareness among its customers about when they use electricity, the cost of that use, and to provide ways for customers to shift the use to less expensive times. At the moment, our system does not allow us to do this, but once the new meters are installed, we will. A little background. In 2009, the town meeting authorized $4.5 million in borrowing for the design, purchase, and installation of a smart grid system. As a result of that effort, 132 miles of fiber optic cable now run throughout Concord. A portion of these funds were spent on gateways, repeaters, and for a limited number of customers, smart meters. That build-out did not spend the entire authorization, and in 2013, the town meeting rescinded $500,000 of the unused borrowing. The limited number of smart meters deployed today allow CMLP customers with electric thermal storage heating systems to store heat when energy costs are low. In addition, these smart meters allow the light plant to control some customers' electric water heaters. The smart meters also capture the amount of electric energy generated by customers with solar arrays. And monthly billing information is automatically uploaded. Street lights can also be controlled remotely through our current smart grid system. Much has changed in the electric energy industry in the last 8 years, and more dramatic changes are forecast for the future. This slide identifies as underlined items the additional smart grid capabilities the upgraded equipment will permit. Perhaps more important, today's smart meters are able to be continually enhanced through software upgrades. The CMLP staff is in the midst of a strategic planning effort, and these efforts are focused on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing the financial stability of the system, and enhancing the reliability of our electric service. Also under consideration are additional demand response programs, the introduction of time of use rates, as well as energy storage systems. All these initiatives will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. This warrant article is a critical first step in achieving these goals. A major outcome will be that every customer will have a smart meter. This will improve the overall efficiency of CMLP and will enable customers to view their energy consumption and reduce their energy costs. This enhancement to the smart grid will not be a simple undertaking. Staff has investigated the capabilities of meters from a number of industry-leading vendors and will choose the one with a proven track record and that will work seamlessly with the new financial management system CMLP is currently employing. It will probably take over 2 years for the smart grid improvements to be fully deployed throughout the town. To speed up the deployment, an outside contractor will be used for the installation of the new meters. At this point, you may be asking, what will this cost? We expect to borrow $3 million for the period of 10 years. At the moment, the median residential customer currently uses about 960 kilowatt hours of electricity each month. This would translate to an estimated increase of under $2 per month. The Municipal Light Board urges your support on Article 26.
Thank you, Mr. Gainsborough. Is there a second for the motion under Article 26? I see that there is. I want to note that the vote requirement on Article 26 is a 2/3 vote. And I'll now, and I also want to note that the Select Board and the Finance Committee both recommend affirmative action on Article 26. I'll now open the floor to comments and questions. Microphone number 5.
Judy Zonbracker, 402 Border Road.
Ms. Zonbracker.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to the security of this grid. Read recently in The Economist and some other articles about hacking, and they talked about meters such as this being vulnerable either for hackers to come in and hack a system and causing damage, or to take over the computing power in meters and then lead to like denial service attacks on other services. So I was wondering if you could address how the Light Board is going to protect our town from that type of threat.
Okay, so I'm going to take this opportunity to ask Dave Wood, our director, to come up and speak to that.
David Wood, the director of the light plant.
Mr. Wood.
The question's about cybersecurity, and it's something we look into all the time with other municipal light plants and American Public Power Association and NEPA. So it's something that's on the forefront regularly and constantly monitored.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Microphone number 2.
David Stevens, Phillip Farm Road.
Mr.
I'm neither
Stevens?
for or against at this moment, but because I have to choose, and I have some questions I choose to, and I will ask my questions from this phone.
Thank you.
I am curious as to the, you mentioned a web portal in this presentation. That web portal, how does that relate to what the previous telecommunications or the issue that was just discussed in question 23?
So the web portal for the smart meters is not related to the telecommunications portal that was presented earlier.
So it's dedicated strictly to the communications to the light plant and for their use?
Yeah, the smart meters portal is dedicated strictly to the electric portal, and telecommunications is separate. They're two different items.
There has been a lot of discussion in the press and other places and technical journals about the effects of these smart meters upon the health and welfare of the residents, even though they are now installed widely and sometimes have been enforced by the use of police force to invade and put those in place. What is your take on that?
It's a area that we again monitor, and you can read articles on either side of the question there. There's some that say it's non-issue and others that say it's an issue, but it's something that we've taken a look at, and we don't feel at this point it is an issue.
Is this if a customer decides not to use the web portal or the smart meter, what is the consequences?
So many of my colleagues have looked at that issue as well, and something that we have discussed is if a customer does not want a smart meter, we would probably continue with the meter they have and charge them an additional fee for the reading of that meter. But it's not we haven't finalized anything on that yet.
One final question. You're asking for $3 million to be distributed for the distribution of new meters, right? And because of that, that $3 million is going to be distributed across the extent or the present network. Is that correct? The cost of that? Or is that $1.72 you talked about going to be added only to the new people?
I'm not sure. I think he's talking about So the $1.72 that Mr. Gainsborough mentioned was just trying to give you an idea what the cost per median residential customer would be. Each type of meter is a different cost. A commercial one's more expensive, so that number would be different for a commercial customer than it would be for a residential customer.
But the point is that all of the customers will be paying for the new $3 million.
That's correct.
So there's no benefit to the old customers. It's only a benefit to the new, and who will assume the cost for a substantial cost for extending it to the others. What I'm saying is that right now, people that are, I think you said something like 8,000 people have them already. Of those 8,000 people, there's I don't know how many more you're going to be putting on, but another 7,000, something like that?
So there's about 800 smart meters right now.
Oh.
Those meters would also be replaced because we're going with a newer technology that's proven. So it's going to go across the board 100%.
Okay, so you're replacing all of the meters in town, not just the new ones.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Microphone number 5.
Gib Metcalf, 19 Damon Street.
Mr. Metcalf.
So as an economist who focuses on energy and climate issues, I'm delighted to see this article on the warrant. I think it's quite important as we move towards different approaches to reducing our energy consumption and smoothing out peak load to reduce our high-end costs as well as emissions. So I think that's great. I would just ask that as we move forward with a broad plan on smart metering and more two-way communication with customers, that we think about the role of information provision, which has been shown to have a really powerful impact on reducing energy consumption as well as greenhouse gas emissions. For example, I can go on Amazon and look at my history of purchases going back for a couple of years, I can't go on a website and find what my historic energy consumption has been, or comparisons with my neighbors looking at, say, the O-Power experiments in California. So I would really encourage you to, as you roll this out and do more planning, to think about opportunities for that kind of communication.
Thank you. Microphone number 5.
Kimball Halsey, 35 Bedford Court.
Mr. Halsey.
So I'm one of the fortunate recipients of the smart meters, one of the 800. And the initial amount that they're talking about here, $3 million, sounds like a lot. They say that it works out to roughly $2, $1.72 per user, or per month, yes, exactly. But using the smart meter, I was able to bring my monthly usage down from 800 kilowatt hours to 600 kilowatt hours, so a 25% reduction. Because with the information that you get, I was able to see what would happen if I turned my computer off. I used to leave my computer on overnight. I turned it off, and those 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours a day that the computer was off, I was able to see the immediate impact on my electrical usage. I did that across a number of appliances, a number of electrical items that I use, and as I say, I was able to reduce my electrical usage by 25%, thereby saving significantly more than $1.72 per month. I strongly support this. I think that it will result in wide-scale reduction of people's electrical bills across the town. So I strongly support this.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Yeah, thank you. Ed Tiedemann, 656 Barrett's Mill Road.
Mr. Tiedemann.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple questions for clarification here. You talk about distributed generation acquisition. Could you explain what that means a little bit more? And second, what communications technology are you planning to use from the smart meter, typically on the side of a house, to your fiber infrastructure grid? Thank you.
So I'm going to try to tackle the first one, and if I get myself in too much trouble, I'm hoping David will rescue me. Distributed energy systems is one of many possibilities for reducing energy consumption throughout the town that Light Board has been discussing. We're in the very early stages of investigating them. An example of a distributed energy system that we're currently using could be considered anyone who has a solar array on their home.
So it's not so much acquisition, it's interconnecting to it? That's what I'm trying to understand. When you say acquisition means purchase, in my opinion, my view. So
it's connecting. That's right.
And the second part of that was it's a 900 megahertz system and connected by Wi-Fi.
Seeing no one else at a microphone, it appears that we are ready for a vote on Article 26. This again is a 2/3 vote. Would everyone in favor of Article 26 please raise their ballots? Thank you very much. All opposed? The motion carries by well more than 2/3, and I do so declare. Now, Article 27 has been addressed on the consent calendar, and we next come to Article 28. Now, as many of you may know, Article 28 is a citizen's petition in which my husband has been involved, and I have therefore recused myself, and Deputy Moderator Briggs will now take over presiding. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Peggy Briggs, the Deputy Moderator. This is quite different this year. I used to moderate the cafeteria when we had 2 rooms, so it's gotten much easier with a single gymnasium. Article 28 is a petition article, and we are not expecting a motion on this article. However, we have granted the petitioner 2 minutes to explain the article and why they have decided not to move it. State your name and address.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Angel of 267 Main Street. I'm the named petitioner on Article 28 Guideline for Preservation of Public Access to Open Space, and I'm speaking for myself and my co-petitioners. Concord's beautiful trails, meadows, woods, and streams are treasured by its citizens, and public access to them is one of the qualities that makes Concord such a special and desirable place to live. Article 28 was intended to recognize this core value of our community. Andrew? I'd like to show you the proposed motion that we would have moved for Article 28 and explain why we have decided not to move it. As a result of constructive discussions with town officials, landowners, conservationists, and other interested citizens, the motion for Article 28 was narrowed in scope from the original article in the warrant. The resulting motion that we would have moved tonight is shown on the slide with relevant modifications highlighted in yellow. As you can see, Article 28 would have been limited to public access to town-owned or controlled open space and would not have applied to private property. It would have made such public access only one of the priorities for officials to consider. Also, as petitioners have consistently explained, the article was not directed to any past, current, or future specific place, project, or issue. The purpose of this article was for the town to make this public access policy, which is observed implicitly by current town officials, more explicit and part of the town's formal procedures. Members of the Select Board have now agreed that the general principles embodied in the proposed motion for Article 28 will be taken up by the Board as a proposed town administrative policy. They've also agreed that these general principles would be included in the Concord long-range planning process. This will accomplish what we sought with our citizens' petition. Consequently, we decided not to move Article 28. We're grateful to all the town officials and citizens who contributed to discussions about this important issue and to this positive outcome. In this year of Henry David Thoreau's 200th birthday, what better way to honor his legacy than with Concord's affirmation of the importance of public access to the natural open spaces that it owns. Thank you, Madam Moderators, both for this opportunity to speak on our article.
Thank you, Ms. Angel. And with that, we'll move on to Article 29, and I'll turn the podium back over.
Before we get started with Article 29, let's take a 5-minute break. Very sorry, Ms. Ortner.
Wheeler House Historic Structure Report. The original Timothy Wheeler House was built in 1750 and since 1887 has served continuously as an affordable retirement home. This study will focus on the history, physical state, historic defining features, as well as recommendations for preservation and improvement. Item G, Concord Children's Center, replacing trees in the natural landscape at Ripley. This project will replace 9 trees destroyed during the August 2016 tornado. Item H, Open Space Reserve Fund. Placing funds in reserve serves to 1, meet our 10% requirement by law, and 2, start building a reserve fund for future projects. Item I, Town of Concord Natural Resources Division, Chamberlain Park Bridge Replacement. Chamberlain Park and the bridge are situated between Keyes Road and Lowell Road. In addition to design and permit services, bid documents will be prepared. Item J, Concord Integrated Preschool Steering Committee, SIPS Playground Initiative. SIPS is next to the Concord Children's Center Playscape area at the Ripley School on Merriam Road. The construction of the new playground will create suitable surfaces and environment, especially for special needs children, and will be open to the public when not in use by the preschool. Item K, Town of Concord Recreation Department Ride-Out Improvement Project. The picnic pavilion will be 20 feet by 30 feet in size with a concrete pad for easy access. This will be the first pavilion constructed in accordance with the department's long-range plan. Item L, Land Acquisition Reserve Fund. With continuously rising costs and land values, placing funds in reserve will help towards securing parcels to meet the town's planning goals. This application is the highest priority for the planning department. Category for funding is to be determined, and funds can be used towards the purchase of parcels under any or multiple CPC categories. Item M, Town of Concord Staff and Technical Support. This application is for funding staff support, signage, legal and consulting services, public notices, copying, and other administrative expenses. Item N, Community Housing Reserve Fund. Placing funds in reserve serves 1, to meet our 10% requirement by state law, and 2, to be available for future needs. This concludes our discussion of Article 29.
Thank you, Ms. Ordner. I want to note that the Select Board, the Finance Committee, and the Public Works Commission all recommend affirmative action on Article 29, and that the West Concord Advisory Committee recommends affirmative action on item K, dealing with ride-out field. Now, I do want to note for everyone that item N on Article 29 sets aside money for community housing. And we will take up in Article 30 the question of transferring some of that money to the Junction Village project. This article doesn't deal with Junction Village at all. So if you are concerned about Junction Village, please hold those questions for Article 30. At this point, in Article 29, we're only setting aside enough money to satisfy the statutory requirement that enough community preservation funds be set aside for affordable housing. Okay? So with that, let's open the floor for questions and comments. And I do want to note that although we do have pro and con microphones, if you haven't made up your mind yet, don't worry about which microphone you're standing at, and just note you haven't made your mind up yet. That's fine. Microphone number 2.
David Stevens, Phil Farm Road.
Mr. Stevens.
Relative to the, in the light of the declining contributions of the state to this fund, how much of the existing fund is going to be consumed by these projects? All of it? Part of it? How much are you going to have left over?
We are using approximately all of the money that we have available. We will be, if Article 29 is approved, we will have reserve funds in both land acquisition and also in community housing. But other than that, we only have $826 in reserve under open space.
So in addition to our surcharge that we're paying each year, we're now being asked to add some more to be able to fund this.
That is not correct.
How much was that increase our surcharge in effect?
Mr. Stevens, if you have a question, just hold on just a second.
I'm sorry.
Let Ms. Ordner answer that. Okay.
The surcharge on your property tax is 1.5%.
Yes.
That has not changed since the inception of the program in Concord.
So that if we vote this, that 1.5% stays.
That is correct.
And whatever accumulates, you either go in deficit or otherwise.
Well, we either spend it or we don't.
Okay.
We can put it in reserve.
So in effect, to summarize my question, the surcharge is not being affected by this. So what does this authorization constitute? What just allows you to spend the money?
No, it allows the town manager to spend the money under the direction of the town manager on each of those projects in the amounts that are shown.
Got it. Thank you.
On the article.
Microphone number 1.
My name is Timothy Rose on 97 Bartlett Hill Road.
Mr. Rose.
I'm standing before the con microphone, but I am not con the current warrant article. However, I would like to point out a historical fact, which maybe I'm the only one who remembers. But back in 2005 or 6, whenever we first voted for this, I asked the question, what would happen if we wanted to change and get out of this program? And they said then it would come back to a town meeting vote. And I've looked at all the last 10 years, actually the very fantastic projects that have been funded by this Community Preservation Act, which has been fine, but as you have pointed out quite graphically, the percentage that is now paid for by the state is quite a bit reduced and getting smaller, presumably. And my real point of making these comments is it time now for the town to once again re-vote on whether to continue in this program? Because many of these, as worthy as they are, would we really want to pay that 1.5%? And while that hasn't changed, the basis on which the 1.5% is being paid has gone up because the taxes, of course, have gone up. And so I think maybe next year the Community Preservation Act Committee ought to think about considering whether or not we should be continuing this in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Microphone number 4.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Charlie Blair, 26 Florio Drive. Question I had is on, you had mentioned under E, the Louisa May Alcott Orchard House, that the 100,000 funding, it's also trying to get matching funds for that 100,000 as well. And my question is, for all of the historic preservation items that are here, are they all also looking for matching funds to meet their requirements? I know in the past, most of the CPA money that we've used for historic preservation has had as seed money for matching funds, and I'm just wondering on this particular list if it's the same thing.
Right, there is only one, and it's the Timothy Wheeler House study for $15,000. We are funding that in its entirety. That has been the application amount that came in, or the amount on the application that came in was $15,000. The other ones are, they're either looking for money. The original application for the Louisa May Alcott project was $350,000. So you can see, and it varies with the other projects. But to answer your question, it was only the Timothy Wheeler one that we funded in its entirety.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Microphone number 6.
Marty Plotkin, 54 Francis Street.
Mr. Plotkin.
The question I had was about the very small item for administrative support. And I was curious to understand the rationale for spending this money on that purpose. It doesn't seem to me from the rest of the discussion at the meeting that there's a particular crying shortage for that purpose.
The 30, you're talking about item M?
Item M, yes.
Okay, and which is $30,000. Okay. We have a staff person who, a town in the planning department, there was a senior planner who was assigned to work with us. We could not have done what we did or what we do every year without having a staff person working with us. And in terms of any legal and consulting services, all of our documents, when we send, after the approvals, there's a memorandum of understanding with the any town project. There's also a grant document for the nonprofit organizations, which lists all our conditions, etc. So these services, I could go on. All the copying, all the copies out on the table.
No, I wasn't. Okay, the answer specifically in support of the Community Preservation
Absolutely,
Act.
yes.
I see that was not clear from the presentation. I just wanted to say, while I have the microphone, that my first impression, not remembering the history of the state contribution to this fund, was, wow, 39% return on your money. That's pretty darn good. So I just wanted to say that it still seems to me like a good deal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 4.
John Flynn, Range Road.
Mr. Flynn?
I've never heard the Timothy Wheeler House called affordable before. Is it?
Yes, it really is. You should go over there and talk to them. You know, if you're interested. At the hearing, somebody said, "How do I apply?" And it is for low-income people. There's also a steering committee or a board that works with the Timothy Wheeler House, and you could get more information there.
Thank you. Microphone number 2.
Madam Moderator, I'd also...
Your name and address, sir?
Oh, my name is George Corrett, 148 Peter Spring Road.
Mr. Corrett.
And I'd also like to consider the idea of sunsetting the CDC, or the Community Preservation Act here. And the thing that kind of pushes me over the edge is the Alcott money. Not because I don't like the Alcotts personally, but you know, the people spent millions of dollars preserving essentially a shack that Bronson Alcott didn't even think was worthy of a foundation. And so, you know, they could have built a replica, but instead they spent millions of dollars on preserving this wood like it was some kind of holy relic. And I think it's profligate, in my opinion, and is really flies in the face of the values of Bronson Alcott. So, but anyway, that's their business if it's their money. But when it's my money and our money, I think, and with the 10%, you know, the decline, I think we really should seriously consider the sunsetting provision, because we could be spending money that is more than the 10%. You know what I mean? I mean, you save 10% and then buy twice as much, you know, just like in, you know, some kind of consumer-driven economy. So that's all I'd like to say.
Could I make a couple of comments on that? I would just...
Sure, very brief, please.
Okay, just a couple of brief comments, not necessarily in defense of the Alcott property, but the Orchard House is in Concord's historic district as of 1961. It was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1962, and it was listed on the National Register in 1966. My point of giving you that information is that the funds for the Community Preservation Act are for the 4 categories, historic preservation being one of them. Fortunately or unfortunately, our town is very historic. We have numerous properties, and more money is allocated to our historic properties over time in the last 10 years. The other point I wanted to make very quickly is we will be having a meeting on June 14th at the Townhouse starting at 7 o'clock at night. The basic information about how the Community Preservation Act works, and for people, new applicants in the community or people in the community who would like to apply for funding from the CPC are encouraged to come, but we would also encourage anyone who has questions or thoughts about the surcharge, because we are going through this change within the state, and action is being taken at the legislature on it. Bills are in process, and so this would be a good opportunity to have the comments that people, to get your sense of what we should be doing with the CPC going forward.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ortner. I see no one. One last person. Microphone number 6.
Mark Galis, 62 Prescott Road.
Mr. Galis.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I just had a question. What was the dollar amount of the most recent state match?
The dollar amount, and maybe Carrie will correct me on this if I'm wrong, it's $223,000 and a little bit more. Yes, I got an affirmative from the finance director on that.
All right, it looks like we're ready for a vote. Would all those in favor of Article 29 please raise their ballots? Thank you very much. All those opposed? The motion carries unanimously, it looks like, and I do so declare.
Thank you.
We'll now proceed. I just want to let everyone know that as of 8:30, we had 360 voters in the hall. And we'll now proceed to Article 30.
Okay, Article 30, the Junction Village Affordable Assisted Living Development. And the next slide, if Mr. Lawson moves the article, and it's printed in the handout that is outside the door.
Is there a second for Article 30? I see that there is.
We can go right to slide 4. Thank you. In this article, the sources for funding come from the CPC and the town's free cash. I shall speak about CPC's contribution only. Article 30 authorizes the appropriation of funds from the Concord Community Preservation Fund for the construction of community housing units at the Junction Village Affordable Assisted Living Development. In the town's application for funding, it is stated that, quote, CPA funding will be applied only to those units renting at 100% area median income or less, unquote. The proposed facility includes 17 units affordable to people at or below 30% of the area median income, which would be $29,430, and 26 units affordable to people at or below 60% of area median income, which is $58,860. This project will expend, under the direction of the town manager, $350,000 for community housing using a combination of existing CPC community housing reserves of $271,757 and projected fund revenues of $78,243. The CPC recommends affirmative action on Article 30. This concludes our portion of Article 30.
Thank you. Mr. Lawson.
Mike Lawson, 1695 Lowell Road, member of the Select Board, and speaking on its behalf.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Proceed.
First, I apologize to the town manager and to the town meeting. I have a nagging and persistent cough. I hope it doesn't interrupt my presentation. I've asked it to be calm, but it seems to have a mind of its own. Next slide, please. The Junction Village project, as you've heard, is 83 units of affordable housing located in Junction Village property in West Concord. This 12-acre parcel, this project has a long history. The town had proposed affordable housing in the Walden Woods area and decided to withdraw that request if additional property could be found more suitable. In 2013, the state declared the property to be surplus and gave it to the Concord Housing Development Corporation with the intent that it could be used only for affordable housing or for open space. It's a 12-acre parcel. It is owned by the Concord Housing Development Corporation. The proposed building is approximately 4 acres, and the remaining 8 acres will be used for open space. Next slide, please. This is a map. The white area is where the facility would be located. The green area is about 6, almost 7 acres, is going to be under a conservation restriction, and the orange is open space. Next slide, please. The need. There is a growing demand for assisted living facilities. Many Concord citizens can't afford to remain in town because of a lack of affordable options. There is currently a waiting list of about 105 people to get in Concord's affordable housing, and I believe about 9 people who are in affordable housing who would be better served by living in assisted living facilities. Also, it is a goal of the town of Concord to be above the 10% Massachusetts General Law 40B state statute. While we are above that number now, it is estimated by the next census, which is in 2020, we will be 48 units short. Any other approach to trying to solve that problem in the next 3 years would be virtually impossible. Next slide. As Ms. Nortner already explained, there are 3 levels of affordability here. There are 17 units of 30% of median income and 26 at 60%, and then 40 units at 150% of median income. I draw your attention to the right-hand column there because it will be important a little bit later. The fees, because all of these units are affordable, the fees for all of these units is regulated. That is, there are no market units. Concord has applied, the selectmen have voted to apply for what is called a Concord preference, and that is that 70% or about 58 of these units would, for what's called the lease-out period, 15 to 18 months, Concord residents would be given preference. If town meeting approves this, we will go ahead and apply to the state for those that Concord preference. Next slide, please. The financing, and this is also important, is in the following. The Grantham Group, which is the developer and will also maintain the facility, will work to gain a mortgage. There's a $5,000 contribution to this through federal tax credits. The Department of Housing and Community Development and Massachusetts Housing Partnership a subsidy of $1 million, $750,000 from Home, which is a HUD organization, and Concord's $2 million contribution, which I'd like to explain. You saw that it was a $350,000 from CPC and $1 million from free cash. The selectmen had requested that over a 3-year period that the CPC would allocate additional funds that would come to a total of $1 million. They've allocated for this year only. That's all they can do. There will be a request next year, and it will be up to the CPC to decide whether or not to honor that request. Next slide, please. This is very important. So the question always has arisen is, why does Concord need to contribute to this project? And the reason is multifaceted. but in general, I'll go through these, but I want to say two things that are most important. In order to compete for these $5 million in tax credits, the state requires the town to show a financial interest in the project. So if we didn't do it, the $5 million would not be granted to Grantham, and the project would not go forward. Simple as that. The other particular aspect of this that's important is that Grantham's revenues, because it's all affordable, its management fee and its development fee are all regulated by the state. Grantham is a for-profit corporation, but all of their revenues and their fees are regulated, so it's a little bit different than just a total for-profit operation. The land remains the property of the Concord Housing Development Corporation, and what's also very important to understand is this property really has no market value. That is to say, it can't be sold to anything other than a total 100% affordable housing. Next slide, please. This slide indicates what we have spent in Concord for various affordable units. You see the list is quite long, and that's terrific. I would want to draw your attention to the very far right column, which is the cost per unit. And notice that this is a cost per unit of $24,000, approximately $100, a very relatively modest sum. Next slide, please. Other cities around our neighborhood have done, and again, you see it's quite varied in terms of the number of units, but also the cost per unit, and again, the Junction Village project is at the end. The next slide, please, is particularly interesting. These are all projects that the Grantham Group has done and shows the contributions that various towns have made. Marlborough made no contribution. Belchertown made 2 contributions totaling almost $1.5 million. $238,000 from community preservation and $1.25 from infrastructure. And in Situate, and you'll notice only 30 units made $2.5 million in contributions from their CPC account. Next slide, please. I'm sorry I'm over, Madam Moderator. Here are the straightforward, significant benefits to the town. We get 83 units of affordable living facilities that are greatly needed. We protect open space with a conservation restriction. The town will meet its affordable housing goals and will be maintaining diversity of housing and providing housing options for Concord citizens. Thank you. And again, my apologies for running over.
Thank you, Mr. Lawson. And we will next hear from Mr. Smith from the Concord Housing Development Corporation.
Lee Smith, 536 Hayward Mill Road.
Mr. Smith.
Madam Moderator, through you, please.
Please proceed.
Good evening, neighbors. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Concord Housing Development Corporation, or the CHDC. Some of our other board members are here this evening as well. We are all volunteers, and we are all Concord residents. CHDC is a nonprofit housing corporation established in 2006 at the request of the Select Board. It is charged with implementing alternatives for providing affordable housing in Concord. CHDC was established specifically to engage in real estate transactions separately from the town to protect the town from liabilities associated with real estate transactions and ownership of property. CHDC is not a town board or a public body and is not subject to the open meeting law. However, at the request of the Select Board, since before the permitting for this project began, CHDC has posted notices of its meetings, invited public participation, and posted all of its prior meeting minutes, which are available to the public. Some examples of our projects include Lolly Woods, Emerson Annex, and Ingham Lane. CHDC pays developers to create affordable housing units by helping bridge the gap between the cost of market rate units and affordable units. We also have a small grant program that has awarded more than $90,000 since 2011 to help homeowners with limited means to maintain and improve their homes. We are here before you this evening because the creation of affordable housing is not free. Without subsidies, affordable housing like this project does not get built. Subsidies are required in order to make an affordable housing project economically viable. Creating 83 new affordable assisted living units will require funding from multiple sources, including the state and the town. The term affordable housing is a broad one that is a complex matter and the subject of state law. For the Junction Village project, all of the rental units will be the subject of permanent, written and enforceable restrictions. Simply put, the restrictions prevent the units from being rented at market rate. Market rate means fair market value without any subsidy or restriction on the property. None of the 83 units will be rented at full fair market value. They will be rented at a range of prices applicable to a range of income and assets levels. Thus, as the result of the restrictions, they are considered affordable. They will remain affordable in perpetuity. In addition, under state guidelines, because at least 25% of the rented units will be available to persons at or below 80% of the area median income, all of the 83 units will count towards the town's subsidized housing inventory. That is what is used to determine whether the town is above the 10% state affordable housing threshold under Chapter 40B. You will hear that $2 million is too much to ask and not fiscally responsible. CHDC believes the opposite is true. New residential development generally represents a significant cost to the town for municipal services. $325,000 per year for a typical 83-unit affordable housing project serving all ages. This versus $2,900 per year for this 83-unit project. These are available funds. There is no borrowing. This request will not increase your property taxes. F17, please. These are 9 affordable housing projects that have received subsidies from the town in the past. They average out to $107,000 per unit. The request before you tonight is for a town subsidy of $24,100 per unit, all while keeping the town's affordable housing inventory above 10% for at least another 13 years through 2030, allowing the town to maintain control of the types, location, and scale of residential development. Under Chapter 40B, if the inventory falls below 10%, as it will without this project, the town will lose much of this control. You will hear that the property is contaminated. Multiple studies have been performed and the site has been deemed suitable for this purpose. The site will not receive financing and will not go forward if substantial contamination is found. If the developer does not receive financing for the whole project, the money requested tonight will not be spent. Only after the developer closes on all his other financing will he receive 50% of the town funds. The remaining 50% is paid only after a certificate of occupancy is issued when the building is complete. After dozens of public meetings inviting public comment, this project has received its comprehensive permit to proceed. The CHDC urges you to support the town's current and future seniors and help ensure that those with limited income and in need of assisted living can remain residents of Concord. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. We'll next hear from the Finance Committee. Mr. Packard?
I'm Carl Packard of 86 Butternut Circle, a member of the Finance Committee and speaking for the Finance Committee.
Mr. Packard.
Thank you. I may repeat some of the facts that have been stated previously, but I'm using them relative to the thought process of the Finance Committee in coming to our conclusions. While there are definite benefits to the town from this project, a significant financial commitment is involved. The Finance Committee has responsibility to exert due diligence in examining financial aspects and tasked a subcommittee of members to analyze in detail the available information and seek additional information. Among the issues we faced were the obligation for a town subsidy. Affordable housing cannot be created in this region without a subsidy. Some town funding is required by the DHCD for the low-income housing tax credits to be sold to investors and for assisted financing. Over past decades, federal and state grants have decreased substantially as a matter of policy and due to fiscal constraints, leaving local municipalities to provide a significant share of support. We looked at Chapter 40B. Staying above the threshold of 10% subsidized low or moderate income housing provides a safe harbor from the town having to take the risk of being obligated to approve a project whether it complies with zoning bylaws or not. However, this is not a zero-sum game. Even with the subsidized housing inventory above 10%, the town will still be obligated to continue to increase its affordable housing stock. Chapter 40B allows the town to work with the developer cooperatively through the Local Initiative Program, or LIP, to negotiate projects that are consistent with local needs, such as the Concord Muse and Lolly Woods projects. We looked at the impact on town services. It would be irresponsible of the Finance Committee to ignore the likelihood of lower per unit costs to the town for the services elderly housing requires relative to those of additional multifamily housing. For most of us, however, this was not a dispositive factor in our decision. We looked at the risks of the project. The risks we identified were addressed by the developer and by the memorandum of agreement executed between the developer, CHDC, and the town. These risks included the financial risks. We reviewed the development pro forma and estimated construction costs and did not find them to be unsound. All permits and bank construction financing must be in place before construction can start and before disbursement of town funds may begin. And the town's window of risk is limited by the MOA so that only 50% funds will be dispersed prior to completion of the project. We looked at the site risks. While there is never an absolute lack of risk when doing subsurface work, several studies have been done, and the consensus is that the site is relatively clean. In any case, the property does not belong to the town, and the risks do not belong to the town. Finally, we looked at the benefits for the town. The project provides affordable assisted living available to elderly town residents, a priority of the town's housing production plan. Affordable family housing can continue to be developed in Concord, but the need for elderly assisted housing is growing, and many of us will need it at some point in the future, regardless of our age now. The project provides affordable units at a subsidy cost per unit that is quite low relative to other options. It puts property that is currently owned by a nonprofit and not taxed onto the tax roll due to for-profit ownership of the building. Again, it enables the town to stay above the 10% subsidized housing inventory and avoid hostile development under Chapter 40B, while still allowing development of affordable housing to continue. Finally, it fulfills promises made back in the 1990s to compensate for proposed affordable housing lost due to the abandonment of the development proposal when the Walden Woods project intervened to save land near Walden Pond. After considering these factors, the Finance Committee voted to recommend affirmative action on Article 30 to provide $1 million from free cash and $350,000 from the Community Preservation Fund to subsidize the Junction Village Affordable Housing Assisted Living Project.
Thank you, Mr. Packard. I want to note that the memorandum of understanding that Mr. Packard referenced is available as a handout on the tables in the cafeteria. We'll now open the floor to questions and comments, and we have con microphones at the front of the hall and pro microphones at the rear of the hall, and I will do my best to rotate among these microphones. Microphone number 1.
Madam Moderator, Dory Keogh.
Go ahead and pull that microphone down there. There
Better?
you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Dory Keogh, 51 MacArthur Road.
Ms. Keogh.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I support affordable housing, but I cannot support the lack of fiscal responsibility and openness in this proposal. Taxpayers are being asked to spend $1 million of free cash plus the $350,000 of CPA. In addition, in the next 2 years, when CPA funds will be less, we'll be asked to contribute another $650,000. Free cash, as described by the town finance director last night, is for the cash stabilization fund or for capital items. This is traditionally meant to interpreted as being for town projects or a town emergency. $2 million will be used to benefit the for-profit Grantham Corporation. Concord will have no equity in the project. Grantham is not putting any equity into the project. The Concord Housing Development Corporation selected Grantham to build Junction Village. And here I would like to contradict Mr. Lee. The CHDC, the members are appointed by the Select Board. It is not officially a town board. But when it was created, the Selectmen's charge specifically stated on November 6, 2006, that the CHDC would be subject to the open meeting law. That group held no public meetings between 2009 and the end of 2016, limiting the opportunity for citizens to become educated. There's confusion about Concord preference. As the town planner said recently, it's not guaranteed. The town may ask, the state gets, state decides, but anyway, it's only for a short initial period. The CHDC mailing, which you all received, implies that this is for Concord seniors. That is not the case. It can't be because of the type of funding being used. So I urge you to join me in voting no on this article. It's not fiscally responsible. It's not the way Concord has operated in the past. It sets a dangerous precedent. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Ms. Kehoe. Microphone number 4.
Mulligan, 34 Indian Spring Road.
Mr. Mulligan.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Well, in addition to being a Concord resident, I'm chairman of Cutler Associates, a builder in Concord, and we have built all of Grantham's projects. We built 6 of their projects, and we just broke ground on a 7th one yesterday. So I know these projects very well, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about them. Our company's been in business for 50 years. We've built thousands of projects, but the Grantham projects are different from most of the projects that we build. Most of the projects are about bricks and mortar. The Grantham projects are about people and community. When we visit a building that we've built, we're visiting a physical asset. When we visit a Grantham project, we're building a place where low-income elderly people can live in dignity and get care and never have to leave the facility. We also have built thousands of senior care units. In fact, we just started a big project in Hingham, much bigger than this project that would be built in Grantham. And the difference there is that the monthly fees are triple or quadruple the fees that Grantham will charge. The Grantham Group is the only one in our region who has figured out how to build affordable assisted living. And the formula includes support from the community. They can't do it without the support of this community. And if they don't do it, no one else will. There's no one else who has figured out a way to deliver affordable assisted living. So that support is critical. And you might think that the support goes to the developer. I think it's much more accurate to think that the support that the town provides goes to low-income elders who need physical help and need fiscal help to continue to live in our town. And I would urge you to support the project. It'll be a long-term asset for the community, and most of the people who live there will come from our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 2.
And David Stevens, Phillip Farm Road.
Mr. Stevens.
I'd like to question this from the standpoint of an elder who is going to be using these facilities. A lot of numbers have been thrown around here, and a lot of them, I didn't write them all down. But what I saw was that for these facilities, the elders who are living there are going to be paying somewhere between $2,000 to $6,000, that's a range, I don't know exactly, per month to live there. That's affordable? Not for most people that I know. I think that is, now Grantham may very well have found a way to reduce that number from what others are. And I know that other assisted living places, you have to sign your life away and your property and everything else, and if that runs out, you're out. I understand that. But I'm not so sure that this is much better. And furthermore, you're talking about people who are low income, people paying $3,000 to $5,000 a year, a month, to live there. I think that is something. This whole process of being driven by the state's 40B mandate to the towns. And so this whole exercise is a defensive posture, a defensive act on the part of the town to defend itself against being forced to do some other unfavorable things with the property. What it does mean, however, is that the elders are sales point, not the real object of this operation. I am opposed to this operation, and I think that if we vote this, we're being very foolish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. We do have Mr. Walter Ohanian here, who is a Concord resident and also, I'm not sure what your position is with Grantham, but he's something with Grantham. He'll tell you what it is, and I think that he can answer Mr. Stevens' question, which I understand to be, can you give us a better explanation of exactly how the fees that are charged to citizens who will move into this proposed development are affordable? Mr. Ohanian.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Walter Ohanian, 488 Elm Street, developer and manager of the proposed assisted living community at Junction Village. The question was about the gross rent or the gross fees to live in this community. And if we can go back to the slide that had it up there, it would be a help, actually. I don't. Maybe they weren't numbered, unfortunately. Keep going back. Right there. Thank you. Okay. So we discussed the 17 units at 30% of the median income at $2,300. When I had seen that slide earlier, prior to town meeting, it had a little asterisk in there, and in the asterisk it had mentioned the amount that was being reimbursed by Mass Health for the services. So the resident basically pays their monthly income towards the rent. If their income is less than that $2,300, the balance is picked up by Mass Health. On the 60% of the area median income, it's a similar source. For the 150% of the area median income, those are typically residents who still have assets, and those residents will use those assets until they're depleted to pay that amount. Once those assets are depleted, they will then use their monthly income to pay what they can, and Mass Health will be billed for services to pay for their personal care that they receive at the community.
Thank you for that explanation. We'll now go to microphone number 5.
Pam Swing, 54 Francis Street.
Ms. Swing.
And I'm standing at a pro, but I don't know how I'm going to vote yet.
I'm glad you found somewhere to stand.
So I wanted to talk about the question of what happens. It's been said that you never have to leave this facility, but what happens if your memory becomes impaired enough that you have to be in a memory unit? Does this facility offer memory units? And if not, why not?
Mr. Ohanian is back to answer that question, and I will recognize you, Mr. Ohanian.
Thank you. So this is a traditional assisted living community that is not a specialty care unit. By the financing of the project with the low-income housing tax credits, you have to have equal access to all the units, to all residents. And when you have a secure specialty care unit, you're actually quarantining off a wing, a floor, whatever it might be. And unfortunately, the tax credits don't allow you to do that. So none of our communities, which are all financed with low-income housing tax credits, none of them have a specialty care unit. That does not mean we don't take care of residents in the early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's, but once they become a wanderer, they would no longer be appropriate for our communities.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Marjorie Daggett, 80 Deaconess Road.
Mr. Ohanian, you can take a seat until we need you again.
Please, no.
Oh, you want him to stay there. All right, Mr. Ohanian, come on back. We got another question for you.
I have a question. Madam Moderator, through you, I would like to ask Mr. Ohanian, exactly, is this strictly affordable housing such that anyone who needed it who was not 65 years old or older could have access. That promotion, it keeps talking about for seniors, but I want to know precisely, could someone under 65 who needed the services use it?
Thank you. Mr. Ohanian, you can answer that question.
It will be for 62 or older. It will have a preference to seniors 62 or older. So no one under 62 will be moving into the community.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Microphone number 6.
Thank you. Tanya Galis, 62 Prescott Road. A quick question, which is, are the rates per person or per couple or family? I'm also still deciding how to vote, but I wanted to point out a nuance issue with the Finance Committee's presentation. The gentleman said that about the contamination issue, that it is relatively clean, and in any case, it won't be Concord's responsibility, but the property owner's responsibility if there are issues with that. I would like to suggest that since we are promoting this as particularly as article that may be of interest to Concord residents and in particular to Concord seniors, that if there are any contamination issues, the town does get involved at any stage, and that we realize that we don't just pass that on to the property owner. Thank you.
So the question was, is the rent per person or for a couple? So once again, under the tax credit guidelines, any single unit can only charge one rent. If a resident is receiving the assisted living care services, we would charge them for the services or bill Mass Health for the services, but the rent would only be one fee.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Yes, Steve Urza, 39 Cottage Street. I'm actually a member of the West Concord Advisory Committee, but I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not the committee.
Please proceed.
One question is on the ownership of the land. Is the Concord Housing Development Corporation would be the owner, not Grantham, correct?
Is that a question? Who owns the property?
Yes. So they would be responsible for contamination.
So if we could just maybe, do you mind if I speak?
Mr. Ohanian, I'm not sure you're the right person to answer this question. Mr. Smith, you want to come up and answer that?
Your question had to do with who would be responsible?
Right. The owner is responsible for contamination, owner of the land. So that would be Concord Housing Development Corporation.
Correct.
Right. That's my. So that was never really stated earlier. That's why I'm okay. All right. Let me just continue. When I read the wording for Article 30, I'm for it 100%. I'm in favor of affordable housing and caring for our residents. It's only when I understand what the town is really proposing that I have serious reservations. We are being asked to make a gift of $2 million, $1.35 million this year, to a for-profit corporation. We will own nothing in return. There's a real difference between for-profit and 501c3 not-for-profit. I've worked for both. I worked 19 years for a nonprofit. We had talented, dedicated professionals who put mission first. I've also worked another 18 years in various corporations. Making a buck, net income, and share value of the company supersedes everything else. Another difference is salaries. You can guess who are more highly paid. Foundations who exist to give money away only give to 501c3 nonprofits for good reason. I urge you to say yes to affordable housing, but no to this article. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Cynthia Rainey, 80 Hunters Ridge Road. The
Ms.
League
Rainey?
of Women Voters recommends a yes vote with reservations. The League supports affordable housing. We support the Select Board initiated and signed MOA and the Finance Committee's rigorous work. We are, however, disappointed with the CHDC's lack of transparency and responsible management in developing and communicating information about this project. We are troubled specifically by the lack of clear and consistent information provided by the CHDC. For example, this misleading mailer to the public about the eligibility of Concord residents may have to reside in this affordable housing. Thank you.
Microphone number 2.
Mary Hartman, 16 Concord Green.
Ms. Hartman.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no for this article, not because of the financial arrangements, because I think those were vetted by both the Select Board and the Finance Committee. And I believe that there are situations where partnerships between limited liability corporations and the town can be a win-win. But for me, this is not one of those times. And my opinion was formed by an editorial I read in the Boston Globe on January 29th. And the title of this editorial was A Citizen's Guide to Survival in Trump's America. And one of the points they made in this particular editorial was that we can have a meaningful opposition if we act locally to institute affordable housing for families as a way to close the income gap that we're experiencing in our country and to counteract the hollowing out of the middle class. And they back this up with actually research, and I won't read you the whole research thing, but I will read one sentence, and it says, "We show that the area in which a child grows up has significant causal effects on her prospects for upward mobility." So what this is telling me is that we had an opportunity, instead of being defensive and thinking about how can we defend ourselves against a hostile 40B development, and how can we do so without taxing town services, we have an opportunity instead to be more proactive and institute affordable housing, either with or without another corporation as our partner, that can actually have a benefit beyond just Concord. So I'm going to vote against this because I think we could have done better. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone number 5.
Jane Blumberg, 36 Lowell Road.
Ms. Maru.
I am inclined to vote for it. Philosophically, I'm just thinking about all the town meetings recently when the seniors in our community have been asked to build schools. And we've spent so much money for the benefit of the young in our community, which I think is really important. But it's also really important to reach out to the other end of the spectrum and to make sure they can afford to stay here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Joanne Gibson, 88 Walden Street.
Ms. Gibson.
I'd like to make a statement and ask 3 questions, please. I'm voting no on Article 30, but I'm not anti-affordable housing nor anti-assisted living facilities. I just think this is the wrong affordable housing project for this site. There should be a smaller scale, multi-age affordable housing there. I was the clerk of the Long Range Plan Committee of 2005, and one of the most important goals that we affirmed was that Concord believes in smart growth. It isn't smart growth to put an assisted living facility with infirm residents near a town center and transportation. Residents of a multi-age project could walk to and shop in West Concord and could take the train. My first question is, to what extent was smart growth considered when deciding on this project? My second point, the MOA binds the CPC to approve $700,000 of CPA funds the next 2 years for a total of $1 million. And I'm also a former chair of the CPC, and I worry that much better CPA future projects will be denied because of this obligation of a shaky project. My second question is, what is the total amount of CPA money Concord is expecting 2 years from now? It's been said that Grantham Group is a for-profit corporation. They're getting free land. And what I'm asking is, and Concord is not in any way guaranteed a preference for after the first year. My third question is there a sunset clause on this land if it's not developed? Or can this go back to the drawing boards to make a better project and put the assisted living facility elsewhere in Concord?
Thank you very much. I will ask Mr. Smith to come and answer the question about smart growth. While you figure out who's going to answer that question, why don't I ask the treasurer to give us her best guess on CPA funds? Sorry, the finance director. That's you, Carrie.
I'm Carrie LaFleur, the finance director. So we collect about 1.3 million or so each year in CPA between what we collect locally and the state match. We don't expect that we would be seeing much of any increase from the state. If anything, there might be a slight decrease. So I think 1.3 million per year each year is a very good and conservative estimate of what we would expect to receive for CPA.
Thank you very much, Ms. LaFleur. Ms. Rasmussen is going to answer the question about smart growth, but we still need to answer the question about whether there's a sunset on the land, and Ms. Rasmussen, maybe you can answer that question too.
Okay. As far as smart growth is a term of planning and was...
And I know who you are, but they may not.
Right. Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management for the town of Concord. It's a term used in planning, and it talks about you put your development close to your services. In looking at this property, I think there is an element of smart growth in that employees of Grantham can take the train and walk to the facility and not have to drive their cars. However, as the Concord Housing Development Corporation was looking at the property and looking at the various development scenarios, they considered the impacts to the local residents, to the town, in terms of services that might be needed if children were being generated versus having older people living there. So I think it was a balance and not a specific looking at it from one point of view or another. I don't have the deed restriction, so I'm not sure about the whether there's a reverter or a sunset clause. So I'm going to turn that back to the CHDC.
Sure. Let's hold that question until we have another question for you. We'll go to microphone number 6.
Anita Barker.
Ms. Barker.
100 Newberry Court.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm ambivalent about this, so I'm in favor of affordable housing, but my problem is Winthrop Street. It just seems incredibly unfair to that very nice neighborhood and very well-kept houses that they're going to have most of the traffic from this facility coming through their property. They already have 3 or 4 businesses at the end of their street, and this is going to be the final blow. We do have another option, and that is the road that goes by the prison. Now, I'm told that that can only be used for fire and police, but I don't understand why, and I think Grantham or somebody should approach the prison or the state or the president and find out why we can't use that road for deliveries. I live in an assisted living facility, and I'll tell you, the traffic from deliveries, moving in and out, families, aides, on is incredible, and I don't think it's fair to that neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Smith, Mr. Rasmussen is going to answer these questions. Okay.
That road is going to go away with construction of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, which construction will be starting next week. We have redesigned the driveway that will serve the prison. The access will be at the same point, but within 100 feet or 200 feet of Commonwealth Ave, The new driveway will then parallel the prison wall and connect to the easterly side of the prison property. So it will be discontinued as a standard roadway and become the bike path. However, Grantham has approached the Department of Corrections and will need to approach the state Mass DOT about the possibility of, at least during construction, bringing construction vehicles through an alternative, or through their driveway and through other areas on the property.
Okay.
Made public, that fact.
Thank you. Microphone number 1.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Nancy Teasdale, 42 Riverside.
Ms. Tisdale.
Thank you. So thanks for calling on me next, because I have a specific question about the traffic assumptions, the traffic impact assumptions. So referring to the handout from the CHDC, in answer to the question here, how will this increase traffic in West Concord? The statement is only 3 to 4 residents will have cars. However, folks who are 62 years old and able to live in an apartment are certainly able to drive. So can we have some detail? Thank you.
I see Mr. Ohanian approaching.
Traffic assumptions.
Sure, Walter Ohanian. So as I had mentioned before, we manage 6 assisted living communities. The average age of our resident is 86 years old. The average number of cars of residents that actually drive is around 3 or 4. People don't just wake up one day and say, I'd like to live in assisted living. Something's happened, something's occurred that causes them to come to a community like ours that offers personal care assistance for those residents. It's not independent senior housing, it is assisted living.
Okay. So in terms of the assumptions about, can you give us some detail about traffic for staff?
Sure. So,
please.
Yep. So we have in the, there was a study that was done on traffic that they had actually gone to one of my current communities and had actually put down those strips where it monitors the cars that come in and out over a time period to show the amount of people and the amount of traffic that occurs. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide on it that would show the number. I can tell you that it was equal to a 20, I think one of the other ideas for the land was to put in 20 units of housing, and it was very similar to what that was. So it was actually, obviously it's going to have an impact to people on Winthrop Street. There's no two ways about it. But it's not going to be a major impact if it was a 100-unit traditional housing community.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I may now belong at the other microphone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Peggy Wargelin, 97 Hillside Avenue. I wondered,
Proceed.
somebody had said that this is untaxable land at this point, but now if we put this building on there, we'll be able to have some tax revenue come in. And I'm just curious, how much a year do we think that will come in for tax revenue?
Mr. Ohanian?
Yeah. So the tax assessor, when they review this project, they're going to be viewing that it is 100% affordable. Between the ground lease and the amount of taxes that will get paid is roughly $75,000 a year. What we're anticipating is roughly $40,000 a year for the taxes and roughly $35,000 a year for the ground lease. So the assumption that we're paying nothing for the lease, I think, is an incorrect statement.
But it would take a while to earn back the $2 million. But okay.
Well, hopefully the investment that the town is making is in the 83 affordable units. That all count towards the housing stock.
Mr. Ohanian, thank you. I think you've answered the question. Microphone number 2.
Yes, hi. Pardon me, Todd Benjamin, Sudbury Road.
Mr. Benjamin?
Member of the Concord Housing Authority, but speaking only for myself. Concord needs more housing, more affordable housing. That's undisputed. We need to have a strong and robust portfolio of affordable housing to meet our needs well into the future. I support affordable housing through my professional and through my nonprofit activities. And I believe that the town should spend money on affordable housing when it is clear what we are getting. The Junction Village conversation has been going on for several years now, and yet there are some significant misperceptions about this project that are truly disheartening. In that vein, I think that my great concern is that the risk of this project and not being clear about this project may hinder future affordable housing discussions and plans in the town. We've heard about some of these misperceptions tonight. One is the local preference, the Concord preference. If that does happen, it will exist for 1 year, the lease-up period as was mentioned. It will apply to 56 of the 83 units. Another one of the misperceptions that we've heard is about the town contribution and that the town must make a contribution. That is true, but the state does not dictate the amount of the town contribution. Other towns with the same project from the same developer have contributed approximately $250,000 to their projects. That is only the cash cost. There are also some other considerations that we need to keep in mind with this project. One is that there is no land cost to the developer. The land is free. Another is the rent that the developer is paying for the land, for 4 acres. That rent is $35,000 per year at most, but it could decrease. And finally is the fact of the real estate taxes. Depending on the assessment, there may be no real estate tax revenue from this project. Those are some of the considerations that I think we should keep in mind in this project, because if we have buyer's remorse, we could negatively impact future affordable housing discussions in our town, which are desperately needed. Now, I do have a couple of questions.
Well, you've got 12 seconds.
Great. So the first question that I have is about the memorandum of agreement, and if we could understand that a little bit more. My question specifically is, initially the town was supposed to have the last money in. Now we see that the town is paying 50% before construction completion. I'd like to understand why that is.
Okay. All right. And that's the only question you get because you're actually in the red now. Would someone from the town like to explain that? Perhaps Mr. Lawson?
Can I make, Madam Moderator, Mike Lawson, 1695 Lowell Road.
Yes.
Can I make another comment before I answer another question?
If you have an answer to another question, by all means.
Thank you very much. Speaker over here said that the memorandum of understanding bound the CPC to provide funding. It does not. It says in the memorandum of understanding that we will request. It's simply the CPC's judgment as to whether or not those funds will be available. So Mr. Benjamin's question, we had sought that there was no requirement to do this memorandum of understanding. I believed it would be in the interest of town to try to clarify as many questions as was possible. So I worked to get this done. We had initially hoped to be able to get Concord's contribution to this project being done only when there was an occupancy permit. But in conversations with the developer, he did not believe that was possible. And we negotiated and came up with the language in this agreement. So there was nothing promised beyond that. We negotiated this and tried to do the best we can. The developers indicated he would try to have Concord's money come in, but he didn't want to make a promise that he potentially couldn't honor.
So are we to understand that the project...
No, you're going to have to stop now, Mr. Benjamin. I'm very sorry, but you've used up your time on the floor, and as you may see, we have many people waiting. So thank you very much. Microphone number 5.
Hi, I'm Susan Viskin from 32 Pleasant Street, and I would
Ms.
like to
Viskin?
speak in support of Junction Village. I have a personal story. 3 years ago, my mother was a widow of very modest means, and she had lived independently, and she now fell, and she needed assisted living. And I would have loved to have her in Concord with me, but she had no money to do such a thing. And I'm sure there are many other people among us who feel the same, who want their families near them. And the affordable assisted living is something that is needed. I also believe that the West Concord will gain an open space. If anybody went on the tour of the land, it's wonderful conservation land near the river, and I think we will all benefit from that. And I think it's a very good use of this land that is limited in many ways. I also believe that employees, I've been on the train where employees are coming from Waltham to work in West Concord, and having the train nearby is important, and it is that, what was it, green space? Smart space. So I think it's an excellent choice for Concord to have these affordable units, which are very cost-effective to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Mary Lynn Boris, 352 Thoreau Street.
Ms. Boris?
I'm a member of CHDC, but I'm speaking on my own behalf. As an older person, I really welcome this proposal. I think it's smart. I think it will offer many, many Concord people a place to go. And the reason why I say many is that it will not, if it fills up entirely, then Concord has a certain amount of opening preference. But it takes about 18 months for a place to fill up like this, I understand. And at that time, anyone from Concord can apply. Another reason that I think it's important is that it offers people, as the woman just said, who have senior members in their family, some chance to plan and have an older mother or father nearby. I think that these things make it a really useful kind of development for Concord.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Nancy McJanet, 500 Thoreau Street.
Ms. McJanet.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I am a member of the Concord Housing Foundation. We are a 501c3, whatever it is. And we've been working for the past 16 years to raise money and awareness about the needs for affordable housing in Concord. We welcome this project. We support it. There are currently approximately 600 seniors in Concord who would be eligible for one of these units. And we are ready to put our money where our mouth is, and will launch a fundraising campaign to support this project. So I urge you to vote yes on Article 30. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McJanet. Microphone number 1.
Karen Belinky, 39 Holden Lane. And could somebody please clarify, we've talked about, how many people from Concord can come to this facility and the limits in time in which that would happen. Can somebody tell us how people will be chosen for this, not just the first year, but ongoing?
Mr. Ohanian?
So residents do fill out an application, and one of the things we want to make sure of is that besides the financial part of the application to see what category they would fit into, in addition to that, we also do a health assessment on the resident and make sure that we can take care of them in the environment that we're in. We will hold a housing lottery prior to opening, having all the units that are available, in expecting that the state and Department of Housing and Community Development will allow for the Concord preference. In reality, what will happen is not many people will come to that housing, and the reason being is, like I had mentioned earlier, it's a need-driven product. You don't just wake up one day and say, I need assisted living, something's occurred. I think we had mentioned earlier in one of the slides that there were currently 9 residents that were in the Concord housing that could benefit from assisted living. I'd expect those residents that would obviously have a preferential treatment to be able to come into the community and pick a unit of their choice. The building takes around 16 to 18 months to be able to fill up. We average anywhere between 4 and 5 move-ins a month. Our average length of stay is just over 2 years, which means we'll be turning over approximately 30 units per year, which will allow residents who might go onto a wait list when they apply to be able to get in a relatively short amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I realize that we have our housing coordinator. You're good. Okay. Microphone number 4.
Madam Moderator, Terry Rothermel, 330 Muskegon Road.
Mr. Yes. Mr. Rothermel, please proceed. Yes. Sorry, it's 10 o'clock.
Affordable housing has been a top priority in all of our long-range plans. That is our Concord tradition. Concord's most recent housing plan foretells a coming demographic bump in our need of affordable assisted living for seniors. Concord town meetings have consistently voted for affordable housing in order to maintain our diversity. Maintaining diversity, too, is our tradition. Concord invests significant monies in the goals and values of our town for open space, schools, farmlands, as well as land for affordable housing. This time, we did not have to invest in the land. This time, our investment is needed for the project itself. Such investment is nothing new in our town tradition. Junction Village represents a new niche in our affordable programs. In this case, it will help to meet the future affordable assisted living needs of our seniors, our current neighbors. Town meetings funding of Junction Village is a logical and well-targeted addition to Concord's housing tradition. I urge your vote in favor of Article 30.
Thank you very much. Now, I do want to point out that we started our discussion of Article 30 at 9 o'clock, so we've been working on this for an hour now. So, and that's fine. I see there's still plenty of people who would like to speak. But if your question has already been asked, or something close to your question has already been asked, or your comment has already been made by somebody else once or twice, you might consider sitting down or at least being very brief. So we'll try to really be bringing additional information into the discussion now. Microphone number 2.
Bernie, excuse me, Bernie Jenkins, 32 Staffordshire Lane.
Jenkins.
Thank you. One, I'm old, and 2, in another life, I was the director of the Council on Aging for 14 years, and I'm sort of appalled at the process that has been gone through by the I can't remember the name of the company, but there are so many people in Concord, me included, who do not need assisted living. We do not need big houses. We want to downsize. We want to stay in Concord. And from what I hear, this is an assisted living facility. There are people, and somebody else said if it's open to people 62 and over. I'm 83 and I still drive, and I would want to have a car. And I think there is a great need for housing, independent housing. Affordable in Concord is never affordable for a lot of people, but something that's independent as a next step from those big houses and the homes that they've lived in forever. But they want to downsize respectfully of themselves. There is a need for assisted living. I have not respected their process in how they've integrated this into the life of West Concord. The traffic, everything, just imagine. I live in West Concord. I know what the traffic is like. But I urge you to not vote for this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Microphone number 5.
Bridget Neal Paris, 241 Prairie Street.
Ms. Paris.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I am undecided as to how I'm going to vote and have a question. Wanted to say, on the one hand, I'm a huge proponent of affordable housing. It's vitally important, and I want to thank everyone involved in the effort to bring affordable housing to Concord. On the other hand, I do have reservations about the concerns raised by several speakers about the conflict of interest between the profit motive and the mission of affordable housing. And I'm wondering if someone from the Select Board or CHTC could comment on, I'd like to understand, do we have experience working with for-profit corporations in other affordable housing units in Concord? Are they all run by nonprofit companies. If someone could explain what is our experience and knowledge in working with for-profit corporations and affordable housing.
Thank you very much. Who's the right person to take that? Ms. Rasmussen.
Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management for the town. Many of our affordable housing units are actually owned and operated by for-profit entities. In those that are rental, only 25% of the units are actually affordable. The remainder are all available at market rate. Grantham is unique because 100% of the units are going to be some version of affordable for the town of Concord.
Thank you very much. Does that answer your question?
I guess so. I guess I'm also wanting to know if there have been problems, conflicts of interest with for-profit as opposed to nonprofit management.
Okay, so any problems, Ms. Rasmussen?
There have been no major problems. We have the Regional Housing Services Office that they also provide training to the for-profit groups on both fair housing practices and making sure that they are following the requirements of their restrictions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Ryan Sykes, 37 Sorrel Road. First and foremost, I am very much in favor of affordable housing and providing housing for the elderly in town. My concern on this project is the deal structure. I finance affordable housing, both apartments, assisted living, independent care on a national level with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD.
Have you filled out a green card? Just kidding.
I am a former member of the FinCom many years ago. So my concern here is I have seen, I lend to for-profit developers on deals like this on a national level. And I want to make it very clear, I have done low-income tax credit deals. And the standard structure in the equity piece is for a town to do something like either provide a tax abatement for 10 to 15 years. On occasion, I have seen a municipality go into a group like our Community Reinvestment Fund and give the developer maybe a soft loan for $100,000, maybe $200,000. I have never seen a for-profit deal where they're asking a municipality to put $1 to $1.3 million for no rate of return guaranteed back to the investor. The town of Concord is asking to be an equity investor in this deal. That's what that is, and we're not getting any sort of return or guaranteed preferred return, which is the normal structure of a real estate deal. And I do business with many for-profit, affordable housing developers, and yes, part of the game is not to put any money in the deal like this one, but they go out and find investors to raise that $1 million, individuals, to put in maybe $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 each, and all those folks are going to get a return on the cash flow from this property. Grantham, this is an excellent deal from their standpoint. I think it's a great project. I live in West Concord, and I'd love to have more assisted housing. That's not the issue. I, as a taxpayer, and the free cash is tax money. It just happens to be in our savings account. So I look at it, it's still using our tax dollars.
You will have to wrap up.
And we do not, my concern is that unless the town is getting a formal return on investment for this investment, we should not be acting as an equity investor.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 6.
Ruthie Bennett, 114 Deergrass Lane.
Ms. Bennett.
Thank you. I look at this project through 2 lenses. One is my own personal view. I highly support affordable housing. I am thrilled that we would have more seniors living in our town, whether they are from Concord or they moved from another town. It sounds like from the developer that people would be here from 1 to 2 or 3 years, so we'd actually have quite a number of seniors being able to take advantage of this development. But I also look at it from a developer perspective. I actually did affordable housing for 16 years for a nonprofit and a for-profit corporation. Affordable housing is highly regulated. The low-income housing tax credit is actually from the 1986 tax plan, and the fee, the amount of money that has to be put into the project is highly regulated. As I understand it, the Grantham Group is not taking their full developer fee. Whether they're a for-profit or a nonprofit, the fee that they can earn is exactly the same. They're treated the same under the law. When I did affordable housing, I found it financially impossible to do affordable senior assisted living. So I'm very excited that we would have that opportunity in Concord. It's very challenging to provide those services for seniors when they're on a fixed income. So I highly support this project personally, but also financially. I think that it makes sense. I'm very proud that Concord would invest financially, but also our land and our resources for this type of project. I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 1.
Good evening. My name is Peter Fulton, 31 Winthrop Street.
Mr. Fulton.
Thank you. I'm going to read a quick prepared statement here, and then I'm going to have an awful lot of ad-libbing here. I'm in opposition of Article 30. I'm absolutely against town funds, the use of town funds, free cash being granted to a for-profit company. As a member of the WinCom Neighborhood Association, I would also like to express my extreme disappointment at the way in which this project has been handled by the Board of Selectmen and the misguided endorsement of the Finance Committee. Many elements of this project were moved forward without prior hearing from the neighborhood, and the host company, Grantham Group, were given many favorable terms without full vetting in the best interest of the neighborhood or town. Only recently, I'll remind Mr. Smith, were minutes of the Concord Housing Development Corporation meetings made public, which kept residents in the dark and therefore impeded the opportunity for constructive, collaborative discussion. Additionally, I have concerns about specific elements of the plan. Access to this project, as proposed and threatened on me, by the way, would bisect the newly formed Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, while in fact there is an access road off of Commonwealth Avenue, which Mr. Lawson reminded us was available as recently as a month ago, which offers an alternative access that does not create a cut in the trail. This parcel is a former dump site, and there is a written engineering report which was presented to the Selectmen and the CHDC confirming the presence of chromium on the site. I have still not received a satisfactory reply as to who would be responsible for the cleanup of this potential hazardous materials site. I'm going to use my final 23 seconds here and ask Mr. Lawson why he hosted a neighborhood group as recently as 1 month ago and said he was going to pursue an alternative access with the Department of Corrections and the Department of Transportation, and without any uncertain terms, Ms. Rasmussen comes up and says the entire approach at the Commonwealth Ave access with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is going to be changed now?
You are going to have to wrap up now, and
I think I made my point.
Yes, we will ask Mr. Lawson to come and give us some further explanation of the access issues. Would you rather have Ms. Rasmussen come and explain them?
You need to come up and hold my hand. I'll try, and we'll see what happens. Mike Lawson, 1695 Lowell Road, member of the Select Board. I did meet with the neighborhood group. I was very sympathetic to the disruption in the neighborhood that this project would bring. I also met along with, I met with the neighbors, I met with Ms. Rasmussen, I met with somebody from the Department of Correction, with Corey Atkins, our state representative, to try to explore using the back entrance of the prison that goes into an access area as a means for access for construction vehicles and for delivery vehicles after the project was completed. It turned out that the road we were talking about was in fact the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Road, and as Ms. Rasmussen said, as part of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail construction, a new access road is going to be made for the Department of Correction that comes in behind the prison, and instead of turning to the right to go up where the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is, will continue straight along the back of the prison. I have told the neighbors, and I will in fact do it, continue to meet with the Department of Correction and the Department of Transportation to see if it's possible to use that new road that goes behind the prison as an access road for construction vehicles. The Department of Correction told me it was very unlikely that they would permit that road to be used for regular delivery vehicles because it's very close to the actual prison, but I will continue to pursue the matter with the Department of Transportation and Correction to see if that new access road can be used for construction vehicles to take that load off Winthrop Street.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Hello, Hugh McCrory, 59 Lee Drive.
Proceed.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge and thank the town and the CHDC for the work done to date, and it's obviously a very important and complex issue. I think if the vote here was if it was just simply for affordable housing, it would be unanimous. Unfortunately, that's not what's laid before us. I had a question, two questions. What happens to affordable housing in Concord if this vote doesn't pass? And the second part of the question is, has anyone from the town or from the CHDC visited any of the 6 other Grantham-built residences or managed residences?
Who would like to take that? Some of these questions could be answered by different people, so.
Sure.
Mike Lawson, 1695 Lowell Road, member of the Select Board. Yes, there have been, to my recollection, 2 groups that have visited Grantham properties. There was a group of selectmen, I was not one of them, that visited the properties, and just recently a member of the Select Board, and I think somebody from the League of Women Voters, also visited the Grantham property. And I forgot the
first question is, what happens to affordable housing program in Concord
we'll
if this resolution does not pass? So I'm undecided, and I'm trying to make a decision. So I'm just trying to get a sense of answering the scenario, because I think everyone's for affordable housing, but
well, if this article doesn't pass, Concord will continue to try to meet its affordable housing goals. It seems quite clear that we will not meet them by the time of the next census in 2020. We'll likely to be some, I think, was 48 units short at that time. But we will continue to pursue other opportunities we have to have affordable housing. There's an article later in the town meeting warrant that would, if it passes and comes to fruition, would create 2 more units of affordable housing. So we'll continue to try to meet our goals. But we won't be able to meet our goal by 2020 if this article does not pass.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Microphone number 5.
Michelle Laura, 82 Shadyside Avenue. And I came in here very uncomfortable about this article, and I want to thank everyone for giving very clear explanations. I have 2 parents who are both living in assisted living facilities and cannot afford to live here, and they won't be able to even benefit from this if it goes through. However, I understand that assisted living facilities provide that goes into it, so my parents could afford to live here, which is amazing to me. And I understand now why we have to put money towards this and why we have to have special offerings towards this. And I'm asking that everyone look at this really big picture, because this truly is affordable living in assisted living, which is astounding. So I urge us to vote yes.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 3.
Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green.
Yeah, proceed.
I'm in favor of affordable housing also, but Grantham's project just isn't green enough. Every time we build new construction without putting the small investment in to make it up to the current energy efficiency standards of passive house or net zero building, we lose out forever on that opportunity with increased costs year after year after year, with no ability to get that benefit, that financial benefit at such a small cost as it is when new construction is built. I know we can't require building code upgrades for private properties, but surely our town could require or request such projects as this to do that, conform to our green standards that we've already done in so many other areas of our town's life. Grantham could have used this opportunity to upgrade their building plans and save this kind of money for their future projects forever and ever. I asked them, I went on the tour and I asked them about that, and they sort of gave me a very nice pat on the head and never heard anything else about it. It also, the cost to build it is small, and it pays off big time in increased comfort and health for the residents, saving much more money year after year on air conditioning in summer and warmth in the winter than the initial cost of the building. And these residents aren't going to have air conditioning in the summer.
Okay, you will need to wrap it up now. Thank you very much. Ms. Rasmussen, do you want to address the issue of what kind of environmental codes buildings are? That's not your job. Okay. All right. Microphone number 6.
Joan Entwistle, 53 Staffordshire Lane.
Ms. Entwistle?
Yes, I'll keep this brief. I do want to point out that concerns about green building, impacts on neighbors, access roads. If we have 40B developments, forget it. It's pretty much what they want to build at the density that they, the maximum density that they can put in. My mother is 88. She's been in assisted living for 8 years. She spends about $7,000 a month right now. At some point, her money will run out, but I also can see that where there is a desperate need for this type of housing everywhere, especially here in this area. So let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good here and vote yes on this.
Thank you very much. Now, I would like to remind everybody again, everybody at a microphone now should have a question or a comment that somebody else hasn't already made, because we've been having this conversation for an hour and 25 minutes now, okay? All right, so microphone number 1.
Susan Walker, 95 Central Street.
Ms. Wofford?
Thank you. I have a question and a statement. My question is we've been talking about it being affordable, and the definition of affordable is with an income of less than $117,000. And I'm wondering, is that a relative to Concord affordable definition, or is it a statewide definition, or where does that definition come? Because I just don't see $117,000 being affordable. And then the second statement I have is the fact that we've been saying the limit of there's preference for the first 18 months for Concord residents, and yet he said it takes 18 months to fill up the facility because of a rolling basis. So the way I see it is Concord is investing in in senior assisted living, which is phenomenal and it's great, but it's not necessarily for the benefit of Concord residents, because Concord residents really don't get much in the way of preferential treatment for very long relative to the length of the unit, of the complex and the investment that we've put in. So I would like to see a longer requirement for Concord residents.
Okay, so we have your point, and now we'll get your question answered.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rust. I'm the manager at the Regional Housing Services Office, and I'm a resident at 201 Commonwealth Avenue. Thank you, Madam Moderator. So the area median incomes, which dictate the income levels, there are 3 tiers here. There's the 30%, the 60%, and the 150%. I think you quoted the numbers of the 150%. The others are quite lower, and it represents the Boston metropolitan statistical area. So it covers Boston and all of the Metro West.
Okay, thank you.
And in terms of the local preference, I think that, as Walter mentioned, the turnover is quite high. It'll take 18 months to lease up the units. So even though there's preference for Concord residents initially, anyone who wants to live there will be able to live there, if not initially, very shortly thereafter. There are 83 units, and there won't be 83 applicants on day one. So whether they're from Concord or wherever they're from.
Thank you very much. Microphone number 4.
Madam Moderator, I do have 3 questions. I am at the pro microphone, and I find this an intriguing type of development, and I'm inclined to vote for it, especially with
And
these.
did you give us your name and address?
Yes, George Corrette, 148 Peter Spring
Thank
Road.
you very much, Mr.
Thank you,
Corrette.
Madam Moderator. So I'm inclined to vote for it, especially with this sort of Damocles hanging over our heads, this great dreaded 40B. If anyone's interested in talking to me about how we could do something about 40B, that could be, they can contact me afterwards. But I do have 3 questions. First question, you talk of mass health. Mass health is Medicaid, is it not? Question 2, isn't under federal law someone who is collecting supplemental security income plus on Medicaid, couldn't they under federal law also get into elderly housing even if they are under age 62? That's a combination of SSI and Medicaid recipient. And the third thing, I've forgotten, fortunately. But anyway, it must not have mattered.
Okay. Mr. Ohanian will answer your questions.
So number one, Medicaid is mass health, or mass health is Medicaid, and number 2 is residents who move into this community will need to be 62 or older, no matter what their source of revenue is.
Gib Metcalf, 19 Damon Street.
Mr. Metcalf.
I move to call the question.
Okay. Well, it's hard to say after this length of time that we haven't had adequate discussion. So this is a motion that requires a second. Thank you. I see that there is a second. It requires a 2/3 vote, and it is not debatable. All those in favor of calling the question, please raise your ballots. Thank you very much. All those opposed? I see that the motion to call the question carries by well more than 2/3, and we will proceed to a vote on Article 30. Would all those in favor of Article 30 please raise your ballots? Thank you. Would all those opposed please raise your ballots? Thank you. Tellers, would you prepare to count the vote, please? The procedure for a standing counted vote is that we will close the doors. Everyone needs to be in a seat if they are preparing to vote. And when the tellers are ready, I will ask people to stand and hold their ballots in the air if you are in favor, and the tellers will go through the rows and tell you when you can sit down. Then we'll go through the same exercise for those who are opposed, and then we will tally the votes. Mr. Fisher, let me know when you're ready. Would all those in favor please stand and hold their ballots in the air? The tellers will let you know when you may sit down. So you think it's tough with the tellers? Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Would all those opposed please stand and hold your ballots, and the tellers will let you know when you may sit.